Okay, we are live. Welcome, everybody.
Hey, Fabio and Matt and Shams and Josh.
And all the people watching after the fact on the
Right.
YouTube show. Yeah, thanks so much for watching the video version of our podcast and for joining us live. Episode 327. We've got something fun scheduled for today, not our regular fare. We're going to be taking a look back.
It's the first time we've done it. 327 episodes.
First time we've done this format.
Yeah.
I wonder if that's true. We've done similar things, but yeah, the idea is we'll talk about when we get to the actual show. As far as the video pre-show goes, as always, we appreciate you watching on YouTube, but we also humbly request that if you wouldn't mind also giving us a download on your like Apple Podcasts or Spotify or whatever, like subscribe to the podcast, just because we have a partnership with Blue Wire and they're measuring us based on our audio downloads and not our YouTube views. So if you wouldn't mind, but we definitely appreciate you being here. And I think we're going to have a lot of fun.
Yeah.
The New Jersey game was stressful. I actually haven't checked in on the latest from today. What happened? Oh, New Jersey won 1-0.
Yeah.
Wow, who scored the winner?
Kyle Palmieri.
Oh, Subban's having. Maybe I'm going to switch my answer to Subban. He's having a good year. Anyway, okay. Ready for me to start?
Yeah.
Okay.
Who's gonna go first?
I will.
Like first on Anaheim.
I'll go first.
Fine.
Or do you want to go? You go first. If you ask, I don't know. Just tell me what you want.
Okay, you go.
Okay.
I mean, sorry, no, you throw to me first, is what I meant to say.
Okay. We have a couple things to get to first anyways. And also we're going to have to make an ad break in 30 minutes. Let's not forget that. But we're not actually going to record it. We're just going to say there's going to be an ad.
I love it. Did you hear back from Tyler?
Yeah, he said that we're going to bake it in, but I'm still going to paste it in my edit.
Great.
Okay. Yeah! Yes! Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Keeping Karlsson Fantasy Hockey Podcast, the longest-running fantasy hockey podcast in the world, hosted by two guys who probably shouldn't be so surprised about so many things a quarter of the way into the season, but here we are. I'm your host, Dylan Dubrovsky. With me, as always, the fantasy hockey robot, the IPP MVP, the poobah of prognostication himself, Brian Com.
Hello, Elon. Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode number 327 of the Keeping Karlsson Fantasy Hockey Podcast, which, for the first time, we're gonna try something new today that I don't believe we've done in 326 other official tries, plus all the bonus, plus everything. This is a first in fantasy hockey podcasting, maybe. I'm pretty sure of it.
Yeah, I think you're going to be looking back 10 years later and asking, where were you when you first heard episode 327 of Keeping Karlsson? Yeah, the plan for today is Brian and I are going to take a look back on the first, I said quarter of the season. I guess we're already pretty much halfway through the year. We're definitely halfway through the fantasy season for anyone who has a playoffs coming up to end their season. We're going to be looking through everything that's happened so far and each of us are going to give our biggest fantasy surprise of the year on each team. We'll see where we agree. Brian and I haven't even discussed this. We've kept our notes separate for once. So we're going to see if we agree or disagree on more teams in terms of who is the player on that team that we're the most surprised by what they've done so far. And this could be a positive surprise or a negative surprise. So we'll talk it all through. Before we get to it, of course, let's mention that we are presented by DobberHockey.com. It's no surprise that they're once again the number one website for fantasy hockey content in the world. I go there every single day. Awesome articles. They have really smart people writing these articles, keeping up to date on anything going on, daily ramblings, plus the tools at Frozen Tools cannot be beat. Eric does an amazing job there. So definitely check it out. DobberHockey.com. But okay, Brian, with that, let's just go alphabetical order. Start off in Anaheim. Who is the player on the Ducks that surprised you the most so far this season?
Okay, yeah, I'm really excited to start this off by mentioning somebody whose name did not come up in any of our preseason talk. In fact, I've got two guys whose names did not come up in any of our preseason conversations about Anaheim. I think the biggest surprise there through this nearly half season of the 2021 NHL regular season so far is that Max Comtois is leading the Anaheim Ducks in points and goals. He's got 9 goals in 25 games. Not only is he leading the team in goals, but like by a mile, a country mile, he has 4 more goals than anyone else. Comtois is also second in power play points, despite playing largely on the second unit. So he's having a heck of a season. And I guess the flip side of that is that the rest of Anaheim is not scoring a ton. And so the obvious question is, can Comtois keep this up? Should everybody just be catching up to him, or should he be falling back? I mean, right now, he only has 64 career games under his belt. And in those games, he's got 16 goals on 87 shots, which is an 18.5% career shooting percentage. This year so far, he's shooting 20%. So it's actually pretty reasonable. It's a pretty wild shooting percentage, though, for someone who doesn't do a chunk of their scoring on the power play. Usually, if a player like Max Comtois has a shooting percentage above 15, 16, 17%, it's because they're doing damage with high percentage shots on the man advantage. Max Comtois, he doesn't need any of that. Apparently, he doesn't even need to, it doesn't take a lot of shots in any scenario, fewer than 2 shots per game on average. So just a really picky shooter, and I guess a smart picky shooter with the way things are going so far. So that is my big surprise on the Ducks, that Comtois is leading the team in points and goals. Elon, are you equally surprised?
Yeah, that was my choice as well. So I wonder if you and I are going to have a lot in common here, but that's 1-for-1 with the Ducks. Yeah, I actually did an interview on the Stat Attack podcast, the couple Stat Attack, hosted by obviously John Newhold and Marcus. And I did an interview with Marcus, and he asked me who is a player rostered in 50% or fewer couple teams that I think is the one I'd like the most. And it was like a tough question because most of the couple managers are smart. And if a player is not rostered on 50% or fewer of teams, that means that they're probably not that good. But I noticed Max Comtois was there. He was my answer. And since then, he's been especially good. So anyone who listened to that and picked up Comtois is happy. And yeah, we'll see if he can keep it up. But, Rickard Rakell's heating up, which is obviously good news, but obviously not a surprise. He's landed just on the same point pace as last year so far. Like John Gibson, I was thinking maybe I'd say he's a surprise from how badly he's doing, but actually his save percentage is the same as last year so far as well. 904 save percentage. So yeah, Comtois is definitely the surprise at this point in the season for me.
I guess for Gibson, for me, it's a surprise that he hasn't bounced back. We talked last week about the types of shots he seems to be facing and how fewer are making it to the net. And I just feel like it would help if the Ducks let some more volume come to him and let those low percentage shots actually get through, which they used to. And he used to turn them away and boost his save percentage that way. But now that doesn't seem to be the case. The other honorable mention I want to make on Anaheim, starting off hot here, Isaac Lundestrom is tied for second on the Anaheim Ducks in goals behind Max Comtois. He has 5 goals in 18 games. Just someone to watch. I saw him playing in 3-on-3 overtime sometime earlier this week. I can't remember the game now, but man, did he look good. So I think Lundestrom, Comtois, and Rakell, you can fact check me. We're all playing on the same line sometime recently, and that could be a fun group to watch. Lundestrom, nothing on the first 25 shots of his career since 2018. He's had a couple cups of coffee before finally sticking this season. Now 5 goals on his last 25 shots. So it's not going to stay, but he looks like he's got some skill.
Yeah, I mean, definitely a deeper cut, but you want to look at Lundestrom. In the last game that Anaheim played, it was Lundestrom with Rakell, and it looks like Derek Grant or Sam Steele. They were switching around, and Comtois was playing with Getzlaf and Terry. Anaheim has a good schedule next week, so you might want to stream in a Duck to get that Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Brian and I plan to be grabbing Getzlaf in one of our joint leagues as soon as the clock strikes midnight. Okay, let's go to the Arizona Coyotes, and I guess I'll start here. We're going to take turns. Brian, this is going to be a boring one. There are 2 players that we've been drooling over this whole season, and so I'm not going to stop now. There's Jacob Chichron, who has been amazing, and his goal yesterday in the 5-2 win over Minnesota brought him to 17 points in 24 games for a 58-point pace. Along with all the peripherals, he's been so great, but you know what? It's not a huge surprise for me. Well, I'm guessing not for you, because we knew he was going to be good. Maybe I didn't expect it to be this good, but I can't talk about Arizona and not talk about Jacob Chichron. That's the rule of keeping Karlsson this year. But I've got to give my answer to Connor Garland. Of course, he leads the team in points with 22 points in 23 games for a 77-point pace. Last season, he struggled to get consistent ice time. This year, he's averaging over 18 minutes per game. He paced for 47 points last year over an 82-game pace. So he's destroying that. Maybe some of us thought that Garland is a player with some potential to maybe be fantasy relevant, but I don't think anyone thought he was going to be this good. So he's been a huge surprise. Plus, he's only shooting 11.9%, which is below last year. So it's not even, I know there's a lot of markers you could look at for lucky variance, but at least shooting percentage isn't one of them. So I'd imagine he'd be able to keep this up. So man, Connor Garland, just all of a sudden, he went from a guy who probably wasn't drafted in most leagues to a must own in all formats, even shallow ones.
Yeah, and for next year too, because I agree with you that Connor Garland, the surprising piece, is half that he's on this 78-point pace. But the bigger surprise to me is that this pace looks sustainable. Connor Garland has more minutes, 4 more minutes a night this season compared to last year as a sophomore. He has 6 more minutes compared to his rookie season 2 years ago. Connor Garland is just coming into his own. A career high He's coming into his own. His career IPP is at 75%, which is above average involvement. So because it's that high now, I'm actually not that concerned. And to me, that's actually a sign like, hey, this guy is actually a pretty good creator at being involved in offense. He's got 3 shots a night on average, although I'm starting just to worry a little bit. He only has 15 shots in his last 9 games, only 0 or 1 shot in 5 of those last 9. So it's a really strange start for it's a really strange streak for Garland compared to his start to the year when he was hanging 5, 6, 7 shots every so often. So I'd like to see that come back. And we've seen some weird minute dips too, but if he just does get to keep the minutes that he's been given so far, and if he can find his shooting touch again, that would be really nice. And I think he really legit is a 70-plus point player this year. Arizona as a whole, we've talked about their offense really showing up this year. They're changing their tactics from just being a shutdown team to being willing to make moves and take risks on offense. Your point on Chichron, like, yeah, that's great. He's having a good season. I know it's mandatory that you bring him up, but not as big a surprise as Garland, right? We saw it coming that Ekman-Larsson might not quarterback the top unit and that there was this opportunity for Chichron, who'd looked promising already.
So Brian, you also picked Garland as your surprise in Arizona?
Yeah.
Wow, 2 for 2. Okay, let's see if we can keep it going in Boston. Who do you have on the Bruins, who just lost a heartbreaker today, 1-0 to the Devils? They got shut out by Scott Wedgwood. Who had that on their bingo card? Okay, who is your biggest surprise aside from Scott Wedgwood shutting them out?
I'm not sure this is going to be so much a who, but it's going to be a what. And that's that the blue line leader, with Torrey Krug out of the picture in Boston, the blue line leader in power play points is Charlie McAvoy with just 4 points on 14 Boston power play goals. Compare that with Torrey Krug last year, who had 28 power play points on 57 Boston power play goals in 1920. So he was in on half of them. We've seen McAvoy on the top unit. We've seen Grzelcyk on the top unit. Neither of them getting in on nearly as many goals as Torrey Krug did from that position. I guess this would be a place I could mention a who. Nick Richie has stepped in as the 4th top power play point getter in Boston. He leads the team in power play goals with 5, but he hasn't had a power play point in his last 5 games and only 2 power play points in his last 11. So he might be cooling off a bit. And there's just this vacuum with Torrey Krug gone. You've got Bergeron, Marchand, and Pasternak cruising along, and nobody else has really come in to consistently pick up those power play points that Krug has left behind.
That's interesting because I bought. Sorry, I'm just looking it up as we go here. That's interesting. Yeah, I also had Richie as my answer. Wait, was your answer McAvoy or Richie? I want to see if we're still in sync, or you went with a what and just blew it all up for us so we can't be in sync.
I've got a couple whats here, so you can share yours and we can see if it was close enough.
Okay, yeah, I did have Richie because I did not expect him to finally usurp Jake DeBrusk and be someone who can actually be productive on that power play. But like you said, yeah, he's cooled off a bit, only 1 goal in his last 5 games, and that wasn't even on the power play. But still, I mean, Richie's someone that you want to have on your roster. Plus, I like that he's on the second line, right? So it's not just like a power play specialist that's toiling in the bottom of the roster. He's playing with Krejci for whatever that's worth. Honorable mention, by the way, to Tuukka Rask's .902 save percentage in 13 games. I think we were expecting Rask to be one of these elite goalies that, yeah, he doesn't give you that many games played compared to other goalies, but when he does play, he's going to be golden. Not so much this year. He was good today against the Devils, but yeah, I'm a bit surprised that Rask has fallen so far. We'll see if he can bounce back in the second half. But okay, let's go to the Buffalo Sabres. And I'm going to have to end the streak of positive surprises here because there's no one that's been a positive surprise to me. Like maybe you could say Victor Olofsson, who I thought might fall off, but he's managed 17 points in 22 games for a 63-point pace, which ties him for the team lead in points with Eichel and Reinhart. At least that was going into today. I just recalled now that, sorry. Which ties him for the team lead in points with Eichel and Reinhart. But no, I'm going to go negative here. For me, it's between 2 guys. We've got Rasmus Stalin with only 10 points in 22 games after he put up a 56-point pace last season. We expect him to only get better as a 20-year-old, but it's gone in the opposite direction. But the fact that he's 20 years old means I'm going to give him a slight pass. Well, I won't say the same for Taylor Hall, who's been a huge bust so far. Only 13 points in 22 games for a 48-point pace. I thought his 66-point pace on Arizona, New Jersey last year was disappointing. So imagine my chagrin now that he's doing even worse than that. I wish he could put up a 66-point pace rest of the way. He got back on the line with Eichel yesterday, at least, in the 5-2 loss to the Islanders. Not that it led to anything, and I'm sure it'll likely change. So not much promise for Taylor Hall right now. He's definitely been a surprise to me in the negative way.
Poor Taylor Hall in New Jersey. There was talk that, he wasn't really doing his part, pulling his weight. Then he goes to Arizona and he does well and the team does well, but it doesn't actually look like it. And everyone's like, did Taylor Hall cause our team to collapse? And then he goes to Buffalo, betting on himself on a one-year deal, passing up some longer-term options, and the team crumbles around him. And of course, he started his career in Edmonton, where that team was constantly crumbling and continues to constantly crumble around their stars. So I wonder at what point he starts internalizing this and taking it really personally and thinking he's the problem. Taylor, it's not you. I swear. I think it's everybody else. And maybe the teams you're choosing to go to. So think a little harder about that maybe. But Elon, it was really nice of you to only name 2 players on Buffalo for you to be disappointed in, because I could name 20, maybe even 21 if I add Jonas Johansson in there after he lost to the Islanders 5-2 today. Everybody sucks in Buffalo this season. Do you know that the 5-on-5 goal scoring leaders heading into Sunday's game were Curtis Lazar and Tobias Reeder with 4 apiece, and Sam Reinhart. So Sam Reinhart was with those guys. I don't know if this is Sunday or Saturday. He had heading into Saturday's game when Reinhart scored 1. So then he's up there alone with 5. But Curtis Lazar and Toby Reeder have as many goals as Taylor Hall and Jack Eichel combined.
Oh, no.
Yeah, Curtis Lazar. And so you go down the list of scorers in Buffalo. You've got Lazar, Reinhart, Lazar, Reeder, Eric Stahl, Riley Sheehan, Dylan Cousins. That's nice. And then you finally get to Eichel and Hall with just 1 5-on-5 goal each. Eichel last scored at 5-on-5 on January 28th, 13 games ago now. Taylor Hall got his first 5-on-5 goal in his 21st game in Buffalo. That happened just a few days ago. It is a disaster. They had a really discouraging loss. And there was a lot of talk during the game that this could be it for the coach. And if it is, I feel like this team still has good bones, right? Like, I feel like there's still some good pieces. If somebody can come in and light a spark and turn this thing around, there is an opportunity to salvage these guys. Like, Elon, if a new coach came in, would you think that Eichel and Hall's value gets bumped? Or are you going to wait 2, 3, or 4 games to make sure?
I mean, I don't know. I'm not going to read too much into a new coach coming in. The players still have to be on the ice and doing something, and I haven't been seeing it. But obviously, we'll wait and see. I'm not going to get ahead of myself. I also saw news that Kevin Adams was saying he's going to be trying to make a trade. It was I think the quote was aggressively looking for a trade because they're not satisfied with the product on the ice. So we'll see what the Sabres can do. Trade away all your picks. Get me someone that's going to help my Taylor Hall, because I've got him on a couple of my fantasy teams. So I did trade him for Shea Theodore somehow in one of my leagues last week, and I'm very happy to have been able to dump Hall there. Though if it turns him around, that'll be fine because I've got him in the couple, which is what really matters. So Brian, who was your official pick there? Should I not even be asking that because you've got 20 picks for this team?
My official pick was Curtis Lazar.
What? Okay. All right. So we're not in sync there. Let's go now to Calgary. Who is your biggest surprise on the Flames?
I could go behind the bench and see that Daryl Sutter being rehired. To me, that was a stunner. I can't believe it's been so long since he's coached, let alone coached in Calgary. And when he left, things were good, but he just wasn't taking the team to the, actually, there were a lot of, I remember it was dramatic. It was actually around the time when I did my first podcast. This was over a decade ago now, before keeping Karlsson. Anyway, so that's crazy. I'm interested to see what he does. But the biggest surprise to me in Calgary so far is that Juuso Välimäki still has not gotten a top power play look. You've got Rasmus Andersson hanging on there on the top unit with just 5 power play points in 25 games, which is good for a power play point pace of 16 in an 82-game season. Very meh. And the whole power play as a whole looks like it could use a little bit of infusion. So why not give Juuso Välimäki a shot? So that's my surprise, that Andersson hasn't worked out. They haven't gone to Giordano. I guess everything's up in the air again now to some extent with Daryl Sutter coming in, a new coach, new eyes, whatever. But to me, it's like I've seen Valimaki. He's looked fun and dynamic at times, and I would just love to see him get a longer look. And I'm disappointed and surprised that he hasn't yet.
Well, I mean, we have a new coach, like you said, so maybe it's all up for grabs. And, we never know what's happened behind the scenes. Like maybe Valimaki's had lots of shots at practice and hasn't been able to succeed there. But I definitely agree with you that the way Rasmus Andersson has been playing on the top power play, it may not last. He already got bumped for a couple of games. I remember it was like 2-3 weeks ago. So we'll see now what happens with Sutter behind the bench. I didn't go with Valimaki. I actually found like most of the Flames point paces are kind of what I was expecting going into the year. No huge surprises, but I ended up landing on Matthew Kachuk, who is a little bit disappointing this year so far. Only 19 points in 25 games. That's a 62 point pace, down from his 72 and 79 point paces in his previous 2 seasons. I didn't expect Matthew Kachuk to like decline this year. I thought he'd continue to be just as good, if not better, but he does have 9 points in his last 8 games, highlighted by a 3-assist game in that 7-3 win over the Sens on Thursday. So it seems like he's trending back up closer to what we're used to, which is where I'll bet he'll land by season's end. So if you've been disappointed in him so far, I feel like better times are coming in the second half of the year.
I agree. I'm not that concerned about Matthew Kachuk. He's a great, reliable player. And I think, at even strength, he hasn't been as awesome as usual, but I don't think his line mates have been quite as good as they usually are either. And then on the power play, he's hanging in there. He's doing everything he should, and his point rates there seem to be holding up just fine. So I think he just needs a bit of a jab in the arm, shoulder, wherever.
Well, like I said, he's already done it, right? He's already starting to trend up after a slow start. So I think it's going to be fine. But I was just saying I had to pick someone who's been a surprise to me so far. And I looked at his numbers. I didn't expect it to be so low. All right, Brian, Carolina. I guess it's my turn to pick my person first. And I feel like this one is really easy. I'll be very surprised if you disagree, though it sounds like you're sometimes going off the board with weird, more philosophical answers.
We're talking about being surprised, but you're not picking the right kind of surprise. Is
exactly.
The feedback you're giving me.
No, I'm loving it so far. I'm just saying, like, I was really going into, like, I'm trying to zone in and think, like, who's Brian going to pick? But I didn't think, fourth dimensionally here. But okay, let's see if we agree. I think it's easy. Like I said, Vincent Trocheck, come on. I did not expect this guy to go back to his 2017-18 self this year after pacing for a paltry 50 points in the past couple of seasons each. But here we are. Trocheck is riding a 4-game point streak going into today. So I wrote that note before Carolina's game versus Florida, where Carolina won 4-2. And let me guess, Trocheck did something. Yeah, Trocheck, another goal, a power play goal. This guy is on fire, right? So now make that a 5-game point streak, sits at 13 goals and 22 points in 23 games. This is so far better than his 75-point pace in 2017-18. Like, people thought of him as like a huge stud then, and now he's doing even better. Plus, he's like up to 11 power play points, averaging almost 3 shots per game. His Cupful ADP, I looked at where he was drafted in the 23 Cupful drafts. Kevin made a spreadsheet of like averaging out the average draft position of every single player. Trocheck's was 205. Going into today, he's currently ranked 15 on Yahoo in the Cupful. So you did not get better value than if you picked Vincent Trocheck. I'm like very excited for him, but I'm also very disappointed in myself for not seeing this coming at all. I wish I would have grabbed him in all my leagues.
Yeah, and if you did grab him, here we go. Here it comes, Elon, the first cold water of the show. I don't think what he's doing. I mean, he's having
sucks.
an
Drop
amazing
him.
season. No, he's having an amazing season, and a lot of it is going to hold, and totally surprising, right? At 5-on-5, nothing surprising is happening. He's pacing. It's like 8 points at 5-on-5 over 23 games. Is on like a 30-point pace there. But his power play production is just off the charts. He's been on the top unit almost all year, which is fantastic and refreshing and good to see. Now up to 11 power play points in 23 games, which means he's pacing for nearly 40 power play points on the season. And good for him. He's just bombing away. He's doubling his best power play point scoring rates ever that he's seen in Florida. But I don't know that I can really get with Trocheck keeping up a 40 power play point pace through the whole season, which means instead of seeing him continue at the 78-point pace, maybe he's going to be like, if you take his 5-on-5 baseline as being 30 points and you give him another 30 power play points on the season, that's still a lot of power play points, and that only gets him to 60 points. So I'm look, I know this is not popular, but I am going to suggest that if you have Vincent Trocheck and you've been loving what he's giving you, it's fantastic. Please enjoy all you want, but also be prepared for there to be a fall off in his power play goal scoring at some point. At least he's still going to get you 3 shots a game. His floor seems like 60 points this year. Hopefully he can still break 70, but that's my caveat on Vincent Trocheck.
Fair enough. I mean, yeah, maybe he's not going to keep up this pace, but I think he's still going to be super valuable the rest of the way. Just his deployment, he's on the top power play. That was the problem. In Florida, he had that amazing year. Then the next year, he got bumped from PP1 for Mike Hoffman, and then everything fell apart. So clearly, he's very good on the power play when he has the opportunity. And now he has it. I guess got to give an honorable mention to Nino Niederreiter, who I'd completely written off. He wasn't drafted in any of my drafts, and he got another point today. I think it was a goal. Yes. And so he's got now 16 points in 24 games for 55-point pace. Way to go, Nino. But Brian, okay, let's go now to the Chicago Blackhawks. Who is your biggest surprise there?
I'm going to go with Kevin Lankinen, and not just Kevin Lankinen, but that Kevin Lankinen is a number 1 goalie in the NHL. Just when you thought Chicago had nothing left to compete, right? They relied so heavily on Crawford and Lehner all season last year. That's the only way they made it to the play-ins, right? And that's the only way they got there. And then they come into this season having traded Lehner, having let Crawford walk, and they come in with a 3-headed goalie, quote unquote, monster of Malcolm Subban, Colin Delia, and Kevin Lankinen, who the latter of which is now 3rd in the NHL in Delta Fenwick save percentage behind only Andrei Vasilevsky and Marc-Andre Fleury. So that means that he is 3rd in terms of goalies who are outperforming their expected save percentage based on the difficulty of shots they're facing. Lankinen has faced the 7th most unblocked shots against 2, so great for volume. He's faced the 9th most expected goals against, and he's 2nd in 5-on-5 save percentage behind only Andrei Vasilevsky. So Kevin Lankinen is having himself, any way you slice it, a season, and he came out of nowhere, right? Undrafted. He spent 3 years in the SM Liga in Finland, putting up save percentages of 907. I'm just looking here, 920, 940 before crossing the pond and coming over.
That sounds good.
Oh, yeah. No, that's fantastic. And then he didn't do much in North America, though. 910. He played in the ECHL, for Pete's sake, in his first North American season, and then got some 21 games in Rockford last season, was a 909 before coming in and just being lights out in Chicago and being that goalie backbone that they've gotten so used to relying on. So that is my big surprise for you, Elon. I can't imagine you can find me a bigger one.
You know what? I'm not giving it to Lankinen.
What?
And that's because I was going to do Lankinen. Then he let in 6 goals today against Tampa Bay. Hurt me in one of my leagues. So it's like, you know what? You're done, Kevin Lankinen. No, I mean, he's obviously a big surprise, and that he's the starting goalie is huge. I'm going to throw out another couple of names. First of all, I know it's like, seems like you shouldn't be surprised, but Patrick Kane, like, is up to 37 points in 25 games. That's at 121 point pace. That was going into today, actually. I didn't look to see if Patrick Kane got any points. Of course, another assist. That's actually a bad game for him to only get 1 point lately. He is 2nd in league scoring behind only McDavid with 42 points. I wrote that yesterday, so he might be tied with McDavid now. So sure, it's like, maybe lame to be surprised that a guy who I expected 100 points from to be at like 120 point pace. But I mean, you got to call him out. I did not expect Patrick Kane to have his best season this year. I thought he'd just continue what he's been doing for the last couple of years. And kind of same goes for Alex DeBrincat, who actually was my official answer here, because he's riding an 8-game point streak going into today, 4-game goal streak, like 28 points in 22 games now. That's like a over 100 point pace. And he's a guy who had a disappointing year last year, right? Only 45 points in 70 games. He was bounced all around the lineup. Turns out he has pretty good chemistry with Patrick Kane. Who would have thunk it? Well, it'll be interesting to see what happens next year when Taves and Kirby Dach are hopefully back in the fold, and we'll see how the Chicago Blackhawks, roll out their lines and if DeBrincat sticks with Kane. But if he does, it seems like we've got a real superstar and someone, kind of at a Vincent Trocheck level in terms of like you had to draft him a little bit earlier than Trocheck, but you're definitely getting huge returns on your like whatever 80th to 100th overall pick of Alex DeBrincat this year. So I'm going to officially say DeBrincat just because I'm mad at Lankinen for his bad game today.
Okay, so yeah, you're outing yourself as being a terribly fickle fantasy manager, which is fair. Like that actually is a positive trait for managing a team. But I am glad you brought up the huge performances. I mean, Patrick Kane is someone who we generally just are complacent about it. I was like, yeah, he's doing his thing, but he's doing more of his thing than he ever has in his career in his age 32 season. So definitely worth recognizing DeBrincat. I'm not that surprised.
You're not surprised he's got a 100-point pace? Well,
okay,
did you predict that going into the year?
Yeah, maybe not 100 points, but I had big faith in Alex DeBrincat. Not that big, though, to be fair. Elon, is there anybody in Colorado whose faith, who has rewarded or the opposite of rewarded your faith in them?
Yeah, you know what? Colorado's not that surprising. Before we get there, Chicago, a few other, I'm not even going to like say any numbers, but just going to throw out some names here. Like Carl Soderberg has been good lately. Like Pius Suter came out of nowhere. Like there's been a lot of surprising guys on Chicago. Like that's the team maybe with the most surprises. As you look through the list of people who are producing, it's like, who are these people? Kurashev has been fancy relevant at times. Anyways, yeah. So Colorado, the forwards are doing what you'd expect pretty much. McKinnon and Rantanen around 90-point paces, maybe a little bit disappointing for McKinnon, but you know, whatever. You can't complain too much. Kadri and Landeskog around 60 to 65-point pace of Burakovsky around a 55-point pace. So nothing jaw-dropping. I guess the easy positive answer here has got to be Sam Girard, who's having a monster year for breakout with 17 points in 20 games for a 70-point pace. And he was drafted on average 224th in the cupful, and he's been almost a point per game defenseman. He's been amazing. But I think I'm going to go negative here just for fun, because I think you went with Girard. You've loved and drooled about Girard for years, but I'm going to say that I'm very disappointed in Ryan Graves. Like last year, he really came out as this like awesome, like, you know, he's going to get you some points and like an amazing peripherals. And he's just going to be like this really reliable guy in multi-category leagues, but he's been a total bust this year. No goals, only 3 assists in 21 games. Like I thought he was looking like he was going to have the potential to be like a Darnell Nurse type in fantasy, where you get this like great floor from his peripherals and like at least a 30-point pace. But no, Ryan Graves, like anyone who drafted him, and he was drafted pretty high in the cupful in a lot of divisions, and yeah, he let them all down. He's been a free agent on and off of my team in the cupful throughout the season. So yeah, I'm going to say Ryan Graves surprises me, because it really looked like he was going to cement himself as this like 30-point big peripheral guy, and he just isn't doing it.
Totally fair that you're disappointed in Graves. At least the peripherals are still mostly there, which they weren't at one point this season. And I think he's probably due to get like a couple more points, but it is disappointing. He does have a low on-ice shooting percentage, so I wonder if he can get it back. By the way, I love how much your takes are based on trying to guess or avoid the same surprises that I'm giving. You're way off. Girard wasn't even on my radar. You actually brushed really quickly past Rantanen, who's not my surprise, but at least I want to give him an honorable mention for quietly rebounding from a subpar year last year, right? He only had an 80-point pace when we expected more. This year, he's got another minute and a half a night. He's on a 90-point pace and is shooting a ton, which is not always been characteristic of Mikko Rantanen. Now he's a bigger shooter on the power play, up nearly 1 whole shot per game on the season, which is great. But my biggest surprise, Elon, this is a very quiet hidden surprise, because Philip Grubauer has a .921 save percentage. Yeah. So on one hand, that's really surprising how great he's been. But the secret surprise beneath that is that he's actually looked pretty bad under the hood.
Oh, like come on.
Yeah, no, I'm going to go there. He has a negative Delta Fenwick save percentage, which means he's underperforming what an average goalie would be doing in his position. Colorado actually protects their goalie 4th best in the league at 5-on-5, going by expected goals against per 60 minutes. And the only reason that Grubauer has this .921 save percentage is because he has been lights out on the penalty kill, which we know is not something we should ever get accustomed to being like to taking for granted and thinking it's going to last. That is something that varies a whole lot through the course of the season. You look at Grubauer's 5-on-5 numbers, which is where we really should be looking to find out exactly how he's doing. Grubauer ranks 31st out of 38 regular goalies in the league this year in 5-on-5 save percentage. That's not a fancy stat, Elon. That's just saying at 5-on-5, the state of the game that you play the most time at, he ranks 31st out of 38 regular goalies. And you can imagine the goalies below him also are very bad if I were to rhyme them off. So Philip Grubauer, I don't know, man. Looking like great position to pick up a lot of wins, but it seems like it could be a house of cards awaiting the fall. Good, lucky for him that Francouz is not around to challenge.
Okay, but how was Grubauer last year in 5-on-5 save percentage in the year before, right? Like, I mean, this is a very small sample size. And yeah, maybe he's not doing as great at 5-on-5, but you can't just like take away his shorthanded success and be like, whatever, that's not sustainable. Like, he's obviously making up for it and having a great year overall. So, I mean, I'm not going to be like, wow, Grubauer, you've stunk this year. Like, I think overall he's doing very good. And it's harder to do well shorthanded. So I know it's like maybe not as sustainable.
Yeah, but it's also more random. Like, you can be a bad goalie and do really well on the penalty kill because like you're talking about small sample at 5-on-5. It's minuscule sample on the penalty kill.
I know, but I'm just saying it's harder. So like, I think we're talking about two different things. There's one thing about trying to predict what's going to happen in the future versus like just giving credit. Like if someone is doing amazing on the penalty kill, you have to be like, good for you. You've done amazing on the penalty kill.
But at the same time, if their high save percentage is based on something that you can't expect to sustain, it's like if a player, this is the equivalent of a player shooting 30% at even strength. Their goals aren't going to keep coming the way they're coming. So Grubauer's saves are not going to keep coming the way they're coming. That's all I'm saying.
I also, though, would predict that I think this even strength shooting percentage is going to, or save percentage is going to improve throughout the year. If I had to bet, if you want to bet on that, I would take it. I don't think he's going to end up being the 35th ranked goalie in even strength save percentage 31st. By the end of the season. 31st.
Out of 38. Yeah. I mean, maybe not, but I'm at least
it's surprising. It's
I'm giving my most surprising projection. I'm giving my biggest surprise from what I've seen thus far, Elon. And that is my biggest surprise, that he is not doing better, because we thought he could be better. When he came to Colorado, he came from Washington, crushing the league in this same measure that he's really flailing in this season. And then last year, he looks like average when we thought he could be better. And this year, he's just going completely the opposite direction.
Yeah, well,
which is a surprise, Elon. Does that count as a surprise to you?
I'm just more surprised by how amazing he's been in terms of fantasy value, because going into the year, we thought he would be a tandem guy, but then Francouz has been hurt the whole time. So Grubauer has been like one of the top goalies to roster in fantasy. So yeah, you could knock his even strength save percentage, but I think at the same time, you could say he's a surprise in how high he's ranking in overall fantasy value.
I said that too. It's a double surprise.
I'm not arguing. Okay. It's what a fun surprise inside of a surprise. Okay, right. Let's go to Columbus now. And who do you have on the Blue Jackets that's knocking your socks off?
Yeah, maybe he's putting them back on, whatever the opposite is. It's Oliver Bjorkstrand who knocked my socks off this year. And yeah, I'm just slowly putting them on my left foot, putting them on my right foot as I see Bjorkstrand's taking this huge step back as time on ice has been cut. He's down 80 seconds a game, including a smaller power play role. And Bjorkstrand hasn't seen anything approaching consistent power play one deployment since the end of January. Career low shot generation at 5-on-5 too. And amidst all this, good for Bjorkstrand for being on pace for 57 points. That still puts him within like 10 to 15 points of where we thought he'd be. But it's still really disappointing, and it's a surprise to be disappointed, especially when he finally took that step forward this year. You kind of just expect that to at least sustain, and yet.
Sorry. I'm looking up synonyms for surprise so that we don't just say the same word over and over again. Okay, I got some different ones now for as we go. Okay, yeah, Brian, I think I'm going to go negative as well here on Columbus. Like, if I wanted to go positive, I guess you could say that Cam Atkinson is having a nice bounce back. He's got 19 points in 26 games, which is much better than his 48-point pace last year. But no, this one I think is pretty easy. And I actually wasn't going Bjorkstrand. You could have said Max Domi, which I didn't, because I didn't have high hopes from going into the year. But I still think it's funny that the Habs fans were thinking that like the Habs should have been the one to not give up a pick in the trade of Domi for Anderson, because now it just looks like, Josh Anderson is like the super valuable player and Max Domi is flailing on the bottom of the roster in Columbus. So who knows how much you could blame on Tortorella, but we've seen Max Domi struggle for a while now. But no, my pick is Patrick Laine. This stinks, right? He was finally getting his career on track in Winnipeg. He had a 33-goal, 76-point pace 2019-20 campaign, but things have not been going great in Columbus lately. He's actually pointless in his last 6 games after the 5-0 shutout by Dallas yesterday, and he only has 4 shots over his last 3 games. This is not looking good, Brian. In one of my leagues, the Puck Hogs League, I drafted Laine in the 2nd round, thinking he was going to be like a minimum like 75-point guy with upside for more, assuming he was going to be on the Winnipeg freaking Jets. Now he's on Columbus, not shooting like on this like point drought where who knows, like I wouldn't even be surprised if he bumped off the top power play soon, because that's just how Tortorella rolls. Like Laine has been a huge bust, and I blame it all on this trade, of course, a little bit on Laine and a little bit on Tortorella, but I don't like it.
Yeah, it's a really surprising. Someone in our on our Discord server in our patron Keeping Karlsson community on Discord asked today who would we prefer between Garland and Liney, and I was like, oh yeah, Liney, and then I'm like, wait, like he hasn't gotten a point in what feels like forever. So it was a fun question to talk further about, but yeah, it's been really disappointing that Columbus is just. I mean, it's not a huge surprise, right? We talked, or at least I talked before the season about how Columbus is not going to be a place where offense thrives and you've got to put a Tortorella tax on any scoring you expect. And it's sad to see that that's hit new acquisitions like Domi and Liney as well. Fabio in the chat, by the way, mentioned that maybe the biggest surprise, and I think he's right, is that the goaltending has just been so bad. They've been able to throw anyone in net lately in Columbus, and they've succeeded. And then even Bobrovsky did well there for a little while, but now it just is not working for Korpisalo. Although I'm not that surprised he's struggling, but I am surprised that even with Columbus's protection, he's not doing that well. But I guess we've mentioned like 4 different names to surprise on Columbus where we didn't agree. Because I said Bjorkstrand and you said Domi as your headliner.
No, I said Laine is mine.
Oh, you moved on to Laine from Domi. Okay. I feel like on Dallas, we're definitely going to agree. Who is your big revelation, positive or negative, in Dallas this year?
Okay, I'm going to tell you who's astonishing me at this moment. So the 5-0.
This segment brought to you by thesaurus.com.
So the 5-0 win over Columbus yesterday takes the sting away from a few of the disappointments. But Brian, like you were already saying that we should be wary going into the season of a lot of these Dallas players who did well in the playoffs, right? So shame on you, listener, if you're currently disappointed in Jamie Benn going through a cold stretch, because like we told you. So sorry about that. But no, Brian, I'm going to be positive here on Dallas, which I know is hard, but Joe Pavelski, like how could you not be a bit shocked that at this point in the year, his goal versus Columbus yesterday brought him to 11 goals and 11 assists for 22 points in 19 games on the season. That's a 95-point pace. And this is after he put up a 31 point in 67 debut with Dallas in 2019-20. So it's bananas that he's turned this around. And as a 36-year-old, but Brian, you know what? Turn off the tap. I'm going to do the wet blanket thing for you, because while I am very surprised that Joe Pavelski has 22 points in 19 games, 14 of his points came in the first 7 games, and that leaves him with only 8 points in his 12 games since, which is a much more meager 55-point pace since early February. And I don't want to take away from what he did in those first couple of weeks, but I'm definitely expecting him to stick closer to that 50 to 55-point pace that he's been putting up since those first 2 weeks, rather than to keep up the overall pace that we're seeing so far. He had like 7 points in his first 2 games, which really boosted those numbers.
Totally. And we mentioned at the time when Pavelski did go on this hot run, and he's continued it, a lot of it was being driven by power play success. Right now, Pavelski's 13 power play points rank him 4th in the NHL in points with the man advantage, behind only Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, and Anze Kopitar, but maybe a little bit more about him later. Those 3 guys all have between 4 and 7 more games played than Joe Pavelski, but only 1 to 3 more power play points than him. Pavelski, of course, has been just boosted by these 9 power play goals on 18 shots, which obviously means he's scoring on 50% of his shots on the power play, versus I would be generous saying that we could expect him to score on 20% of his power play shots. So yeah, I'm not seeing anything special from Pavelski at 5-on-5. He's actually got his lowest 5-on-5 point rates of his career this season, except for last season, which was really bad. That was a total disaster. This year is just like a slightly less of a disaster at 5-on-5. He's still pacing for about 40 points at 5-on-5, but he's going to need 20 to pace for 20 power play points the rest of the way to be a 60-point guy the rest of the season, which seems reasonable to me. Like, I know it's hard to part with a guy like him, but easier to part with him than Vincent Trocheck. And I really, 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 really encourage you to sell, because Dallas, I don't think they're a very good team. I said it.
I mean, they maybe will get Tyler Seguin back at some point. I think it's like a month now, and Ben Bishop will be coming back. So I wouldn't be surprised to see them like potentially like slump into the playoffs. But if they can get in, maybe be a bit of a surprise for a playoff run. But for now, yeah, I'm not going to want to rely on any of their guys in fantasy. Like Dennis Gurianov has totally disappeared, which is a bit of a bummer. Okay, Brian, we're going to go next to Detroit. But first, let's take a second to thank one of our sponsors. Ad break, because I already recorded it.
Wow. Oh wait, and we have an ad also. We have our own ad.
Okay. Oh, right.
I just forgot to pop it in here. I'll throw it. I'll send it to you on Discord because it's. I don't know if you have.
You could just do the whole thing.
Okay.
Maybe you could say this episode of Keeping Karlsson was also brought to you by, like something like that, since it'll come after the other ad.
Okay.
You know that means that potentially there's going to be 3 ads in a row. Can we maybe do the other one like in a little bit?
Sure.
Yeah, let's do that. Okay.
Let's
bring it up like after, I don't know, after Ottawa.
Okay. Are you sure? Why don't we just knock them all out?
We're going to do, there might be 3 ads in a row then for the listener. It might be kind of like,
okay, YouTube chat, would you rather have 3 ads in a row or 2 ads and then 20 minutes later, another ad?
They're probably just like, just keep going.
Wait for the delay.
Yeah.
K-Town is saying pull Yarvi off the top line, back to being irrelevant.
Yeah. Well, I mean, but it's going to change again.
Yeah, for today.
Like, don't pay attention to, this is my new rule. Don't pay attention to any lines unless they've lasted for 2 games.
This is coming from the guy who runs the Game Day Lines Twitter account, which...
Yeah, so watch it, pay attention. But I'm saying I want to see 2 games, and it has to be doing something well. Like if the line has stuck for 2 games, but they have 0 points, like, you know, and the team has been shut out in those 2 games, then expect it to change.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, everyone says to just do the ad now, so go for it.
Votes are 3. Okay. Thanks, Fabio and Shams. We really appreciate that. Also, like just a heads up, like if anybody feels like let us know
about
how
what
you feel about. I don't know, the ads. I hope
it's a free show.
Yeah. I just hope it's not interfering with
my headphones have this thing where whenever I'm listening to a podcast, an ad comes on, I go bloop, 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 bloop. Fast forward 30 seconds each time. Boop. But I recommend you support
we wouldn't encourage that at all. Yeah.
Yes, support the sponsors of Keeping Karlsson.
The sponsors support the show. So
all right, let's do it. All right.
All right. This episode of Keeping Karlsson also brought to you by MyBookie. It's gearing up to be a great March for sports and by extension, a great March to try and make some extra money with MyBookie. With March Madness right around the corner, MyBookie is offering a shot at a share of $10,000 with the My Bracket contest, and it's only a single dollar entry. Plus, there's a ton of NHL and NBA action on tap. And they've got a couple UFC pay-per-view cards to bet on as well. Regardless of your favorite player or team, you've got the choice from thousands of lines and prop bets on all major sports, and it's all in one place at MyBookie. So do yourself a favor, get a head start by signing up today with the promo code Karlsson, like the second word of our show's name, and they'll match your first deposit halfway up to $1,000. That's free cash credited to your account instantly on top of your deposit. The best part of MyBookie is that you always have access to the action, whether you're at home or on the go. Visit the website online or on your phone at mybookie.ag and use the promo code Karlsson to grab yourself a deposit bonus. Bet anything, anytime, anywhere with MyBookie. And if you are planning to play with MyBookie, head over to responsiblegambling.org. There's a link to that and MyBookie in the show notes where you can find all kinds of resources to help make sure you are playing responsibly, including some pre-commitment tools that let you set a loss limit and a win limit and encourage you to stop whenever you reach those limits.
Okay, thanks for that, Brian. And one team I would not recommend betting on MyBookie is the Detroit Red Wings because they stink. Maybe you're going to get great odds, so maybe that's going to help you. But man, this team has had a terrible season. So Brian, why don't you go ahead and tell us who's surprised you the most so far on the Red Wings?
Oh, like I'm speechless. Right? Like Bobby Ryan, okay, he leads the team in points, 52-point full season pace. Am I surprised? Like 13 points in 22 games. It's not that surprising. I get like the obvious answer, but we've talked it to death. We named an episode after it. I don't know if anyone got the Velvet Underground reference. I hope so. But Anthony Mantha, just 1 point in his last 10 now, 10 points in 25 games, a 32-point full season pace from Mantha. His power play role is all over the place. Career low shot generation. He's down from 3 shots per game to less than 2.5 shots per game, which doesn't feel like a big drop, but man, it feels like a big drop. So Anthony Mantha just being terrible it's no longer a surprise because we've already acclimatized to it and put a lot of attention on it. So I guess my other mention, because I'm finding it hard to find a real surprise in Detroit, is that Jonathan Bernier has been a top 10 goalie this season. Huge volume in Detroit. and has earned, or at least had seemed to have earned before this last week when we pumped his tires so much and then he totally let us down. Bernier seemed to have earned the role of being like straight away number one starter. We'll see if that continues when Detroit hits the ice again next week. But yeah, I guess somewhere between Ryan, Mantha, and Bernier, I have a little bit of surprise.
I mean, Bernier being the starter didn't surprise me, but it did surprise me that I guess like we talked about him as someone you might want to add to your fantasy team. Yeah, he was on a good run, but Detroit's terrible, right? So even if Bernier sticks as the starting goalie, like sure, maybe he could keep up what he was doing earlier in the year, but I would definitely bet against relying on a Detroit goalie because this team is bad. Like you said, Bobby Ryan leading the team, and Brian even gave him more credit than he deserves because Bobby Ryan has 13 points in 25 games, not in 22 games. It's a 43-point pace. Yeah, but Anthony Mantha, total bust, right? He's a free agent in a lot of my leagues, and I have him on my watch list still. We'll see if I get to a point where I even like unstar him on Yahoo and don't even want to see him on my watch list. But it's been a disaster. Maybe when Larkin comes back, something could happen, but I doubt it. So, okay, I agree with you with Anthony Mantha. And let's go to the Oilers now. And I gotta say, I'm not very nonplussed about any of these guys. Like, yeah, Jesse Puljujarvi had his run with McDavid, scored versus Calgary on Saturday, but overall hasn't been that great and like not good enough for me to like put him down as my like, oh wow, I can't believe what Puljujarvi did this year. Like he has 2 goals and no assists in his last 7 games. So I guess I'm going to go with a negative here. But obviously like McDavid's having an insane season, right? So I'm not surprised by it, like McDavid, but I love it. And it's really cool. And I hope he just continues to win the Art Ross and he should win the Hart. I hope there's not gonna be some weird thing of like, oh, maybe he doesn't deserve the Hart trophy because of some reason, like the Oilers don't make the playoffs or whatever. Anyways, so it's obviously not gonna be McDavid. We knew he was awesome. So I guess I got to go with Kailer Yamamoto. So I guess I've got to go with, yeah. So I guess I've got to go with Kailer Yamamoto, who did have a goal and assist versus Calgary on Saturday in the 3-2 overtime win, but has still been quite the bust. Only 13 points in 26 games for a 41-point pace going into today. He was drafted 120th overall on average in the Cupful. And I don't even know how much fab I would bid on him if he were dropped at this point. Like maybe I would go for him. Recent Oilers lines have Yamamoto with McDavid, which is obviously something you want to go for. If it lasts, we'll see if it does. The Oilers, it's one thing to get on a good line. It's another thing to stay on that good line and to have success there. And plus the Oilers, if they like load up their top line too much, then they might, do well with Draisaitl, McDavid and Yamamoto, but then, struggle so much the rest of the time they have to shift things around. So yeah, Yamamoto still interests me, but definitely nothing close to what people were expecting going into the season after his great run last year.
For sure. Yamamoto doing nothing is a disappointment, especially still playing with Draisaitl, right? It's not like he has no one to play with. He has one of the very best players in the league and world, and it just doesn't seem to be clicking. We knew last season that the chemistry between he and Draisaitl and Nugent Hopkins was incredible and not sustainable, but we still thought there was enough there to make Yamamoto worth having on your roster for most of this season. And yet, so really disappointing for Yamamoto. My surprise in Edmonton this year, Elon, is actually, how about Tyson Barrie? I know that that's kind of a lame take, but if I were just to ask you, maybe but I hadn't checked on his point pace in a while. What point pace do you think he's on?
I think it's around like 55.
Oh, wow. Yeah, you nailed it. 57-point pace, 9 power play points.
That's basically what we predicted going into the year, I think, right?
Yeah. But I just feel like the season started off so disappointing for him. Right. And there was like, is he going to stick on the top power play? He's got 9 power play points already. Everything is fine with Tyson Barrie, which I feel is a little surprising. Like we were waiting for the wheels to potentially fall off and they haven't. He's doing his defense is still very suspect at 5-on-5. That's not surprising, but I think he's still doing exactly what he was brought in to Edmonton to do. So I think it's, to me, surprising that I'm not surprised by what he's doing.
Brian, if you were the GM, if you had Ken Holland's job, would you offer Tyson Barrie like a contract extension right now, or would you let him walk in free agency?
I think I would let him walk, assuming that the contract extension is going to cost me, say, more than, I don't know, $6 million, and that might even be conservative. I feel like you could put Rasmus Andersson on the power play. That is to say, anybody on the top power play in Edmonton, and they're going to be okay. Like maybe your quarterback will get 45 points, but you've got Ethan Bear, you've got Darnell Nurse, you've got Evan Bouchard coming up, who's looked really good at times, like still someone who's coming into the NHL and learning how it works. But I think there's a lot of potential there, and I would say goodbye to Tyson Barrie if all he can do is run my top power play that already has McDavid and Draisaitl on it.
Yeah, so I'll be very interested to actually see what happens with Barrie over summer. Him and Taylor Hall are both guys that signed 1-year deals. Now we'll see if that turned out to be a smart decision for them or not. Okay, so we're going to go to Florida now, and I guess it's your turn to start, Brian. So who on the Florida Panthers has startled you and astounded you? I shouldn't give too many away, but yeah, where are you right now on the Panthers?
Yeah, slow down on the synonyms. We've got to make them last for another, 27 teams? Patrick Hornqvist is my surprise on the Panthers. Like, we were hoping for a good season from him, but 71-point season? No, that's not what I was expecting. And I can't find something to tell me that he's not going to just keep this up all season. A lot of his numbers under the hood are looking pretty healthy. Nothing really jumps out. Yeah, he's shooting a little better than he should on the power play, but a little worse, or actually a fair amount worse than he should at 5-on-5. So I think that might wash out a bit. Maybe he's not quite a 70-point player, but the fact that you can probably count on him being like definitely over 60, hopefully over 65 points, is a long ways away from before the season when we saw opportunity and potential, but I was not ready to take a very big risk on it. And now I'm kicking myself for not having done that.
Yeah, I remember going into the year, like when he first got traded to the Panthers, I remember thinking, oh, I'll bet you he's going to play with Barkov and Huberdeau. That would be so sweet. But then when we saw the first like preseason lines and it was Duclair and Verhaeghe with Barkov and then Hornqvist with Huberdeau. And I don't know, for some reason in my head, I was thinking, oh, maybe that's not as good, but like it's been more than good. It's been fine. It's actually pretty funny to me because remember how it used to be, or maybe it still is for a lot of people, that when you get traded to Pittsburgh, that's supposed to be the thing that's like the best for a player, right? It's like, oh my God, this player just got traded to Pittsburgh. Kasperi Kapanen, Jason Zucker. Like, let me get all over this person because now he's going to play with Crosby or Malkin. But like Hornqvist is like getting out of Pittsburgh is what's turned his career around. It reminds me a lot of David Perron, who went to Pittsburgh. We were excited about him. He did nothing there. Finally, he goes back to St. Louis. I think there was a stop in Vegas around that time. But yeah, like Perron's totally turned his career around. So it's like not as if Pittsburgh is this like amazing place for a player to be. It's like there's other places in the league. And right now, Florida has been a great landing spot for Patrick Hornqvist. We could also throw out like Carter Verhaeghe, who's someone that no one probably even knew his name going into the year. And now he's been on the top line the whole time. And he's been pretty solid. I love what Aaron Ekblad's been doing. I'm not that surprised ever since we found out that he was going to get a shot on the top power play. So that was the big moment there. Was like, oh, this is going to be a big year for Ekblad, and he's totally delivered. And this isn't really someone who's done too much yet, but I'm going to throw it out there. I'm really liking Frank Vatrano as a free agent ad. So I know that's not the purpose of this episode to just give general takes like
but we liked him that way, like for a lot of last year too, right? Like
Vatrano?
Are you surprised that?
No, this is like, I'm going out. I'm taking a step away from the surprise.
Okay.
And now I'm just wanted to tell my friends, the listeners of Keeping Karlsson, that Vatrano's been playing on the top line with Alex Barkov lately. And he didn't get a point today, but I'm expecting him, like he had a goal and assist, I think on Saturday. And he's going to, I think, continue. Like if he's on the top line with Barkov, I think Vatrano's like a great volume shooter, even when he's in the bottom six. And for however long he's on that top line, I think you're going to want him on your roster over a lot of the other options that are available. So go and grab Vatrano. But yeah, I do agree with you that Patrick Hornqvist is the biggest surprise this year on Florida.
And a lot of candidates. You mentioned Ekblad. Chris in the chat is mentioning Verhaeghe coming out of nowhere. The fact that Barkov and Huberdeau were split is a surprise. Chris Driedger being apparently the number one goalie, not Bob, not Spencer Knight, Chris Driedger. Correct me if I'm saying his name wrong.
Well, I'm not going to correct you on that. I think you are. It's Chris Driedger, but I'm going to correct you that I don't think that's the case anymore. Like it was a surprise at the time, but Bobrovsky's been playing really well lately. And he's been getting more stars. Driedger played today in the back-to-back, and he didn't do so well. They lost to Carolina, so I wouldn't be surprised to see Bob get the next start like he has over the last week, been generally getting the starts that are not on back-to-back. So I think this Bob Driedger controversy is starting to come to an end unless these guys can, like change their fortunes once again.
Yeah, I'm going to just look at my schedule yesterday because playing on the second half of the back-to-back is harder to start with. And Bob got Nashville while Driedger got Carolina. So I don't think it's totally fair to draw a big conclusion from this back-to-back. But what I am going to say, and the reason I brought up Driedger, is that it's actually leads to maybe the biggest surprise of all this is that Florida is a top defensive team in the NHL. Joel Quenneville has whipped that group into shape. They're the second best team defensively in the league at 5-on-5, behind only Montreal. They're ahead of Dallas, Colorado, who we mentioned earlier, and even the Islanders. So way to go, Florida, for playing a tight defensive game, and that is going to help whoever is between the pipes for them.
Yeah, definitely agreed. It's tough against Carolina. They're an amazing team, but against a lot of the other teams Florida gets to play this year, it's a good situation to be in. All right, let's go to LA, and it's my turn to go first. And I gotta say, like Patrick Kane, Andre Kopitar has been a stud forever, but is somehow putting up his best ever season this year as like a 33-year-old. He's got 28 points in 23 games for a 100-point pace, currently riding a 4-game point streak, including a 2-goal and 1-assist game versus the Blues on Saturday in the 4-3 overtime win. But even with all that said, I'm still not doing Kopitar as my biggest surprise on the team. I'm going to give that honor to Drew Doughty, who has 4 points in his last 4 games, 19 points in 23 games on the season for a 68-point pace. That's his best pace of his career so far as well. And this is after 2 like 45-ish point pace seasons that were making him look like maybe his like one really awesome year in 2017-18 when he paced for 60 points. That really looked like an anomaly and something he would never be able to do again. But now he's like blowing even those numbers out of the water. So anyone who drafted Kopitar or Doughty are loving life, but I would say Doughty is the one that really shocks me because I thought he was like trending in the other direction, but he's totally bounced back.
Totally. Drew Doughty is also my biggest bombshell on the LA Kings because of that power play production. He and Kopitar are actually doing very similar things at 5-on-5 that they've always done, but that power play has come alive, which is a drastic understatement for exactly what they're accomplishing. Drew Doughty has 12 power play points, which is good for 5th in the entire NHL in power play points, just behind the aforementioned Joe Pavelski on that career high 68-point pace, as you mentioned. For context, Doughty had just 14 power play points in 67 games this year, just 2 points away from tying that measure. And he is the biggest surprise just because Kopitar we have already seen, just because Kopitar we've talked about, so it feels a little less surprising, but Doughty really flying under the radar, having this insane season. So way to go, Drew Doughty and Anze Kopitar for doing big things on the power play that may not quite sustain, but honestly, they still look really, really great. And of course, in all likelihood, are giving their managers a lot better value than they would have thought when they potentially drafted them, I guess, in certain shallower leagues. So that does LA for us. Let's move over to Minnesota, which has been a team chock full of interesting things that have happened all season long and off season before this and the season before this. So, excuse me. So where does that leave you, Elon, as you look at the Minnesota roster and results?
Wait, you like coughed in the middle of your last sentence. You should take that over.
Oh, okay.
You're like, and the season before, and the season before this. So.
No, I didn't. That's not what happened. I think so was a pretty clean. Okay. And just the season. And the offseason and the season before that. So now, Elon, after seeing what Minnesota's results have been so far this season, what bewilders you the most from this Minnesota Wild season so far?
If you want to give me first, this was your turn, but I'll take it. But that doesn't mean I'm relinquishing my next one. But yeah, I'm going to say that. No, I'm just kidding. But okay.
No, it's your first. You went first for LA. I went first for Florida.
LA was the last one we just did, Brian. And now, and I said Doughty. Oh, that's okay. You already threw to me, so let me just do it.
Sorry.
No one's really keeping track. I think it's fine. Yeah. So first of all, I'm just going to say about Minnesota, Kirill Kaprizov is the best. And I hate myself for not drafting him anywhere after talking him up all summer. I called him to win the Calder Trophy. He has 19 points in 22 games now. I won't be surprised to see him hit point per game by the end of the season. So yeah, it stinks that I'm totally not shocked at all to see him doing this well, because I totally saw it coming. For some reason, I couldn't get him. I drafted like 5 different leagues and I didn't get Kirill Kaprizov in any of them. So anyways, Brian, you've kind of said, we've had a lot of players that we've been talking about on Minnesota. Right now, Kevin Fiala seems to be in a little bit of a cold stretch, but I'm not too concerned about him. And there's a lot of players that I could throw my vote to, but give me a Jordan Greenway as someone who I really hadn't heard of too much going into the season. Like even Joel Eriksson Ek, I remember thinking over the summer, well, someone's got to be a center on this team. Maybe Eriksson Ek ends up centering like a Kaprizov or a Fiala, and that'll be good. But Jordan Greenway really wasn't on my radar at all. And his goal in the 5-2 loss to Arizona yesterday brought him to 5 goals and 13 assists for 18 points in 22 games for a 67-point pace. This is a guy who was a total non-factor in fantasy for his first 2 seasons in the league. Now he's doing amazing. Second on the team in points behind Kaprizov. So go Greenway.
Go Greenway. Don't get caught at the red when you. Sorry, I'm not going to take that any further. Greenway has been a really pleasant surprise, as you mentioned. And Elon, he's doing all of that with a very secondary power play role. So his 67-point pace is probably a little high, but I think it's safe to consider that Jordan Greenway, who we did have on last season, and I can't remember, maybe just a hint of the season before, probably a little high right now, but I think it's safe to consider Jordan Greenway having arrived. Speaking of a secondary power play role, that really doesn't distinguish his power play production from anybody else in Minnesota. My big surprise for the Wild is here's another one that's not a who, Elon, I'm sorry. But this whole team's power play has been terrible. How many power play points, Elon, do you think the leader how many power play points, Elon, do you think the team leader has in Minnesota?
Well, you've kind of set this up in a way where it makes, I don't know, 3.
Not even. Parise and Fiala each have 2 power play points apiece. Oh, wow. And then there's a bunch of guys with 1. The Wild power play has scored just 5 times on 72 tries, which is below a 7% shooting conversion rate, which means that that's a third the success rate of most of an average NHL power player, just above average, I guess. Minnesota is shooting at 4.7% on the power play, which is wild. They're dead last, by a mile, but they're second in the league in 5-on-5 shooting percentage, above 10%, which is unsustainable. But just it's weird to me that they're shooting twice as successfully 5-on-5 than they are on the power play. Neither one is going to exactly stay where it is. They'll regress a little at 5-on-5 and down, and they'll regress up on the power play. But I think what this means for my take is I want to draw your attention to Kirill Kaprizov, who you mentioned as being such a pleasant surprise as he comes into the league. He's pacing for 71 points. He's doing that with just 1 power play point so far in top power play deployment. And so if I do a little back of the napkin math here, he could be doing even better. Kirill Kaprizov, not totally sustainable at 5-on-5, but I think this honestly just means that 70 points is going to be a fair But I think this just means that 70 points is going to be a fair floor for him this year. It is incredible that this is a Timo Meier season. Remember when Timo Meier didn't have any power play deployment but still got 70 points? Kaprizov is doing that with the power play deployment that he just hasn't cashed in on yet. So I'm really excited to see just how high Kaprizov can go when that power play does start rolling.
Yeah, I mean, I did say when I was talking about Kaprizov that I expect him to hit point per game by the end of the year. And obviously that will be a big part of it. I didn't realize the power play was so bad. We're on Montreal now. Kay Towney here in the chat said, talk about Kotkaniemi, hitting machine in the bubble, now plays with Montreal's 2 best scorers. So yeah, the most recent lines in Montreal have Kotkaniemi playing with Josh Anderson and Tyler Toffoli. So that's some interesting news. And I think that's a really fun line. But Brian, are one of those 3 players going to be your choice for the most surprising player on the Montreal Canadiens?
Honestly, I look at the Canadiens roster and I don't see any real things that I consider that I find myself in awe of.
Oh, wow. I have one.
I didn't expect, I guess. Well, okay. So the one that really jumps out is Jeff Petrie leads the team with 22 points in 23 games. I don't know. I guess that is a totally valid one. I just felt it was a little too predictable to be surprising. We talked about him earlier in the year, going wild, not sustainable, but I think it is pretty impressive that at this point on a team with so much scoring capacity, Jeff Petrie is, just under a point per game pace. That is really surprising when I do say it out loud and not just type it in my notes. The flip side is that Shea Weber has just 4 points at even strength through 22 games. This has not been a good season for him. He's still really struggling. And remember, he only gets 50% of the power play time most of the time because that's how Montreal splits their units. So to me, it's pretty amazing that Jeff Petrie is having this much success in the exact same context that Shea Weber is struggling.
Yeah, Brian, I mean, this is our opportunity now to hold ourselves accountable if we want to change our mind. Like you just mentioned that you brought up Jeff Petrie a couple of weeks ago and said it wasn't sustainable. I think he's still at a point per game since then. He's on a 3-game point streak right now. He's just continued to be phenomenal. So do we need to redo that take, or are you going to double down and say, no, still what Jeff Petrie's doing, he's not going to be able to keep it up?
He's shooting 10% at 5-on-5. He's seeing 2 minutes fewer a night at 5-on-5 as well compared to last season. And on the power play, he's shooting 18% with a career high points participation rate too. So no, I am not going to back too far off this take. I think he could definitely hit 50 and put up some nice peripherals. Sorry, hit 50 as in have a 50-point pace the rest of the season. But this is ludicrous. There's no way he's keeping up this near point per game pace, or he shouldn't. It's not sustainable. So hot streaks can go forever. We had someone mention, I can't remember if it was on Twitter or a Discord server, that it is maybe something to consider that in a shortened season, these unsustainable streaks make up a bigger piece of it, and they're sustainable for a larger proportion of a shortened season than they would be of an 82 game season. So I don't just mean to wave it away what Jeff Petry's doing, but I am saying that it's not something I really think is totally deserving of. And I would be worried that if my team is relying heavily on his production, that I'm going to need to find some secondary sources if and when regression does finally come to haunt Jeff Petry.
Yeah, it was Patty who brought up that point as a question for our upcoming patron cast. So it'll be fun to discuss that a bit more. Petry's probably not going to keep a point per game moving forward, but I think anyone who sold high, quote unquote, I really hope they sold really, really high. Otherwise, they're probably mad at us for taking that advice. And we'll see what happens. The thing is, this North Division, right? Montreal's scoring a lot of goals. I don't know. There's a lot of reasons why Petry can still end up getting, if not a point per game pace, maybe a 70-point pace, 60-point pace moving forward. He was +4 and only had 1 point in that game against Winnipeg on Saturday when, what was the final score here? 7-1. So it's even surprising that he didn't have more points in that game. He could theoretically be even above a point per game pace over the last couple of weeks if he would have gotten in on one of those goals he was on the ice for, but just didn't happen to get a point. Okay, so let's go. Oh, did I give my answer for Montreal? I guess so mine's Jeff Petry. I will say also, and has been mentioned in the chat here, Carey Price, who we've talked about recently, him not doing as well as he, has been. It's him not doing as well as I hoped going into the season is something that obviously has surprised me, but he's kind of turned it around a bit lately. He's got a new coach. So I'm hoping that moving forward, things will be better for Price. But yeah, obviously I didn't expect that Jake Allen would be so much better than Carey Price at this point in the season. Okay, let's go over to Nashville. Luckily, Roman Josi has bounced back recently with 7 points in his last 7 games after a slow start. So we don't have to say him. I'm realizing, Brian, it's your turn. Why don't you say, oh no, you said, oh wait, no, sorry. I'm getting all confused. I'm going to keep going. Yeah. So we don't have to say him. Matthias Ekholm has been super hot and has the potential to be a second half MVP of this year. He's been scorching ever since Ryan Ellis has left the lineup with his injury. So he's not the surprising so far, but I think starting now moving forward, Ekholm could be one of those great free agent ads midway through the season. So I just want to mention him. But I think I'm just going to be boring here on Nashville and say that Philip Forsberg and his 24 points in 24 games is amazing and not what I was expecting, right? It was really looking like he wouldn't hit that point per game potential that he teased us with back in 2017-18, at least not on this team. He'd been a 60 to 65 point guy in the last couple of seasons, but everything is coming up Philip in 2020-21, especially versus Florida, by the way, where he's put up 2 straight multi-point games this week to go along with his 2-goal and 3-assist game versus the Panthers back on February 4th. So if he didn't play, and it's funny because Brian, you talked about how Florida's been this good defensive team this year, but that's the team that Philip Forsberg has been able to feast on. But overall, you can't argue with the point per game pace, and Forsberg's really had an awesome bounce back. I really hope he can keep it going the rest of the way.
We've gotten a real jolt from Philip Forsberg's production this season, but I think the most impressive frame for it, aside from saying, yeah, he's finally broken through, is that Philip Forsberg is lapping the next highest scoring forward on the team. 24 points in 24 games versus the next best forward, Victor Arvidsson, with half as many points, 12 points in 24 games, which is just wild, right? And Philip Forsberg benefiting from this time on ice bump that we've been waiting forever for, seeing a career high 5-on-5 minutes a night, still not all the way there to, I'd love for him to see 15 minutes a night. Right now he's at 14 minutes a night, but at least that looks top 6E compared to middle 6E, which is where he's been stuck for years. Forsberg is getting all this production thanks to a 92% points participation rate. And before you knock it, just remember, that's what Roman Josi did on the power play last season, all season. So I don't know it's going to quite keep up, but it does speak, I think, to how much this Nashville offense is relying pretty much solely on Philip Forsberg to do stuff for anything to happen. I'm really confident that Forsberg is finally going to get up above a 70-point pace again and has a legit shot to beat his career high 78-point pace.
Okay, so Brian, let's go over to the New Jersey Devils. We're into the news. We got the Devils, Islanders, and Rangers coming. So why don't you start us off with the player that has shocked you the most with his production on the Devils, unless you want to go off board again.
Okay. Yeah, I'm going to go off board. The shocker in New Jersey is that nobody is scoring. Nobody. You've got Miles Wood. I guess Miles Wood is a surprise, like Curtis Lazar in Buffalo. Miles Wood leading the team with 7 goals, Pavel Zacha with 6, then Jack Hughes with 5, which basically means nobody else on the team aside from those 3 is pacing to even have a 20-goal season. And only Zacha and Hughes are pacing to reach more than 50 points over 82 games. But New Jersey's offense is actually ranked 4th in the league at 5-on-5 in expected goals per 60, but their 5-on-5 save percentage is brutal, down at 29th in the league. So there could be room to grow here. You see Palmieri, who has now is up to 10 points in 20 games thanks to his goal tonight. That puts him at a 41-point pace. Hischier, Johansson, Gusev, they all should have something more to offer than what we've seen so far. But so far, the biggest surprise to me is Miles Wood is the team's leading scorer.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you that the biggest surprise is how disappointing everyone has been. I know Pavel Zacha was on a bit of a run. I'm not expecting that to continue. Patty saying Zacha's the easy choice. Yeah, I didn't expect him to go on this 8-game point streak or whatever it was. But yeah, there's some players who started so hot, right? Like Jack Hughes, Ty Smith. I was super excited about these guys a couple weeks into the year, but they've totally fallen off. But if I'm going to pick one player that I'm the most shocked by, it's got to be how bad Mackenzie Blackwood has looked lately. He's letting 3+ goals in each of his last 7 games. Not good. He's now down to a 904 save percentage on the season. And he started the year with a 940 save percentage after 5 games. So he was looking like the star of the league. And he's been so bad that 940 has gone all the way down to 904 in just the last 7 games. I don't even know what to recommend with a guy like Blackwood. On one hand, generally our advice would be maybe buy low. He's shown and it's true. He has shown that he could go on these runs where he's a fantasy MVP for you, playing all the games and just having great games game in, game out. But at this point, this team is seems to be going down the toilet. Hischier is out long-term now, which is not great. So I feel like Blackwood is someone you might have to consider dropping, especially Wedgwood just had a shutout today. So that just means Blackwood maybe isn't even going to get all the starts we were expecting in the near future. And once he does get back in the net, as I'm sure he would, but how good will he be? He's really struggled. So he's going to have to turn his game around.
Yeah, he really is. That's a great surprise, Elon. But part of it isn't that shocking because Blackwood's workload has been insane. Going into today, he'd started 9 of the last 11 games, which in a normal season is oh yeah, sure, he started 9 of the last 11, but those 11 games happened in a 2.5 week span, in this super compressed schedule. And Blackwood was coming off an injury before that. So was it an injury, Elon, or did he have COVID? Do you remember?
Yeah, I believe he was on the COVID list.
Okay, so he had freaking COVID, and then he comes back and is playing almost every single night, including 2 back-to-backs in this run, with Aaron Dell until Scott Wedgwood being the only backup available to them. The Devils and Blackwood, I think, really got burned, and I don't mean that in a personal way, by Corey Crawford not being there. Corey Crawford had every right to make the choices he chose, but they thought they had solved this problem that they had come across the past couple of years, which is that Blackwood can't do it all. And here they are again, stuck with having to ask Mackenzie Blackwood do it all, which is just not that viable a choice.
Yeah, by the way, to say something positive, PK Subban is kind of turning things around. He's not the superstar he once was, but I added him in the couple a few weeks ago, and he's been getting points every couple games. He got another point today. He's giving you good peripherals. So PK Subban is not done in terms of being valuable in fantasy. So that's really nice to see.
I'm also going to add Patty in the chat has mentioned that the Devils have a lot of wood: Wedgwood, Blackwood, Miles Wood, and Palmieri, as in palm tree, with a little emoji there, which is maybe one of the most entertaining Devils takes possible for a team that's having this much trouble on offense and on defense. So there go the Devils. Elon, who the Islanders are also a pretty classically boring team. So is there anyone that you're marveling at over in Long Island?
Yeah, I am not stupefied about Barzal, Lee, or Eberle. They're all pacing around what we expected, 75, 58, 51 points respectively. I could say Nick Leddy, right? He's somehow pacing for 50 points. Got another point today, I believe. I expect that it's not going to last. And I just don't want to say Nick Leddy. I just don't feel like it. He's going to have to do it. He's going to have to do it for like 2-3 more weeks before I actually lock it in that Nick Leddy's turning things around. I'm going to go negative again, though, here and say that Ryan Pulock, I think I might be done with Ryan Pulock, or at least like we had high hopes for this guy. I remember like a few seasons ago, keeping Karlsson, when we saw him kind of come onto the scene, he had like, 40 plus point season. And it was like, okay, I think this might be the future of the New York Islanders, the new power play quarterback. He's going to end up being a really valuable guy, and especially someone who gets a lot of peripherals. So he's going to become your new like stud defenseman. I was kind of holding him in the similar regard to Jacob Chichron going into this year. I thought those were the two guys I'd love to target in my drafts. Luckily, I got Chichron in a couple of my leagues. I didn't end up getting Pulock in any of them. That's worked out just fine. Pulock has definitely not been a Chichron. He has no goals and 9 assists in 24 games so far. He has 45 shots. So some of that might be bad luck. Maybe 1 or 2 of those shots should have gone in, but he's shooting at his lowest per game pace of his career. So this is partially his fault, right? He's off the top power play at this point. Nick Leddy's back on there. He's only got 1 or 2 blocks per game lately. So he's not even helping you so much with that peripheral category. Brian, we had such high hopes for this guy, thinking that he's going to eventually be a 50-point high peripheral defenseman. And now I feel like maybe it's not going to happen.
Maybe it's not going to happen, especially because at 5-on-5, he is taking about 25, maybe just 20% fewer shot attempts per 60 minutes, which is really disappointing because, when he did come into the league, he had in his first full season, his career high shot attempts and shots on goal rates, and he has not matched them since. And we keep thinking, like they're going to need to turn to Pulock now. And even though it seems like they need to, he's not really there to do anything. So that has been for sure a disappointment. I am going to point out another disappointment in Long Island, which is Brock Nelson, who, like Pulock, has been Mr. Reliable in certain senses. Now, this is before the game that Nelson had today. He definitely had at least a point, maybe 2. But coming into today's game, Brock Nelson, you could count on him for 55 points. He's only on a 41-point pace, thanks largely to 5 power play points that he's scored without spending significant time on the top unit. That is to say, I'm not sure that he could repeat those 5 power play points over the back half of the season, but there's reason to think he deserves better. 6% shooting percentage for himself, 6% shooting percentage for his line mates while he's on the ice at 5-on-5. So things should be going for Nelson, but he's someone that you used to be able to set your watch to, like Ryan Pulock, has just been like, he's going to be on my roster. He's going to do exactly this much for me, and I'm going to be happy about it. And he has not done that yet. Sorry.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. I thought you were done.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, well, so he's starting maybe today to turn that around. Like you said, he has 2 goals today on 4 shots. So bringing that shooting percentage maybe a bit back in line. So he's maybe a good person to target in the second half of the season, because you're right, he has been reliable for so long. So I don't want to use the small sample size to think he's done doing that, especially with low percentages that maybe could turn around. Okay, Brian, let's go to the Rangers.
Wait, but just before we do.
Oh, okay, please.
I just want to give a very quick kudos to Semyon Varlamov, who...
So good.
Yeah, so freaking good. 926 save percentage and a 72% quality start percentage. Maybe we should have learned more from last year about how he was lights out. And I wonder, we thought it might be a 50-50 timeshare, but we didn't see him really taking the reins as he has this season. So that's been really exciting. And he's still playing for a top 5 defensive team. Sorokin might get like a bigger share of the starts the rest of the way, but I don't think it's going to be 50-50. So to just a shout out to Semyon Varlamov.
Yeah, I will agree with you that it has been surprising that Varlamov's gotten so many starts so far, but I do actually still stick with my preseason projection for moving forward. Like Sorokin's finally started to get more starts. He's looked great in like all of them. He's won his last 4 starts.
Yeah, I don't think he's looked great in all of them.
Okay, yeah, he led in 2 goals on 20 shots or whatever, 2 goals on 18 shots against Buffalo. So it's it's hard for a goldie when there's a reason why they don't call that. Like it's still considered a quality start according to Dauber when he stopped 16 of 18. Just because when there's few shots against, you basically have to get a shutout in order to have good numbers. Yeah. So I'm going to count 4 straight wins and letting in 2 or fewer goals in the last 4 games, including 2 shutouts. I'm going to consider that good.
Point taken. Okay,
so the Rangers. You know who I'm going to say. I hate him so much, so you could do it for me.
Yeah, it's my turn, so I will do it for you. Mika Zibanejad scored his first 5-on-5 goal of the season earlier tonight as we were just starting to record this episode. So that's really exciting. I know he's haunted you a lot. There were actually a lot of candidates here like off ice, I think might have been the biggest Rangers surprises. You've got Panarin having to take some personal time off. You have D'Angelo disappearing or being disappeared from the blue line. And then on the ice too, their prospects on the Rangers still aren't quite doing a whole lot of anything. You've got Kakko with 4 points in 15 games. Lafreniere, though, if you have stopped paying attention and you're in a redraft 1 year format, he quietly has 6 points in his last 7 games. Has been playing with Buchnevich and Zibanejad at 5-on-5, taking occasional turns on the top unit. So he's just someone to keep a side eye on if you're in a shallow enough redraft league that he happens to be available.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think back to Steven Stamkos' rookie season where he actually was really slow at the start and then turned it on at the end. So I could definitely see something similar happening for Alexis Lafreniere, who, because of the circumstance of, Panarin being out of the picture, he's like playing, like I said, on the top line, or I guess I don't know if you call a line with Zibanejad the top line or like the fourth line, the way Zibanejad has been playing. But hey, a goal today. I mean, but also the Rangers are losing 3-1. So obviously, if there's any good news, it's going to be counteract with lots of bad news. By the way, the other big news on the Rangers recently is that Igor Shesterkin is out. It looked like it was a lot worse than it turned out to be. He's only day to day, but in the meantime, having to rely on Alexander Georgiev. I know a lot of people like rush to grab Georgiev because he's going to be a volume guy, but I really don't think he can handle it. And it's not looking so good today against the Penguins. So I don't know, like, yeah, if you want to get starts, grab Georgiev while he's, the only goalie on the team aside from Keith Kincaid, who we've seen what Kincaid could provide in Montreal, which is nothing. But I'm not too excited about Georgiev. I think he could blow you up more than he could help you. Okay. Ottawa, your favorite team.
Yeah, I call myself a self-loathing Sens fan, so it's always hard to call them my favorite team, but I begrudgingly admit that they probably are my favorite team.
I mean, it's easy to tell considering every time they have a good game, you're like tweeting like 20 tweets that night, as opposed to when they're having a bad game or not playing at all. But okay, yeah, let's go to the Sens. A lot of bright spots this year, right? Like obviously they're not like an amazing team, but Batherson, Norris, Stützle, Brandstrom, all doing better than I expected. But Brian, just because I know you're going to go positive because you like this team, or maybe you won't now that you're saying you're self-loathing, I'm going to go negative and say that Evgeny Dadonov, like, he's someone that we had some high hopes for going into the year. I remember, like, we talked to Dom Lucian, and he had an even higher projection than our patron projection project. We were asking him why, and he said, in North Division, I think he'll be good. But, like, that was one of the few things that Dom unfortunately got wrong. Dadonov has been completely irrelevant. Like, he's dropped in all of my leagues at this point, not on my watch list in any of them. And this is a guy who was drafted 131st overall on average in the Cupful. He only has 9 points in 26 games, only 1 point in his last 9 games. So he's even worse recently. Like, he actually had a good start compared to what he's been doing now. He's earning $5 million a year for another 2 years. Huge bust. Hopefully that's worth it for him, that he's going to be making a lot of money, but his rep is pretty much ruined in my eyes. Like, now I'm going to remember Evgeny Dadonov as that guy who got to play with Barkov and Huberdeau and juice his numbers for a little bit before he went to the Sens and totally disappeared.
I feel like that's being a little unfair to him. I'll be perfectly honest. This is not me being a homer. I think first off, Dadonov was a fun swing to take and a very weird landing spot in Ottawa for him after having been with Huberdeau and Barkov and not having one, let alone 2 players of that caliber on the roster. So he came to Ottawa with a lot to prove. And at 5-on-5, he's slipped a little, but he's still on the top power play, and he's just not seeing anything happen. No goals on 16 shots that he's taken, when over the last couple seasons, you could count on him to score 20% of the time. Mm-hmm. So like maybe 3 power play goals would have been fair. He also has just 1 assist. His points participation is like in the dumpster, 12.5%, which is laughably low for a forward on the power play. For him on the power play, you would hope for like 50% points participation. So I honestly think that he can do better, like not a whole lot better, but I think he can probably get at least to 50-point pace compared to the current 28-point pace.
I'll bet you on that for sure.
Okay.
Because like we are seeing so many other players do it. If you think that he's going to have a 50-point pace moving forward, I definitely disagree. I think like all these guys that I mentioned before, like Batherson, Norris, Stützle, they're all like better than him at this point. And like, I don't know. I just don't see it happening. I know you're saying that he is not getting as many of his shots going in on the power play, or he's not having a high IPP. So I guess we'll see, but I would be surprised.
Just seeing some really poor variants on the power play. And so I think
but don't you think it's also kind of likely that he gets bumped from that top power play at some point if he continues to, like, you're saying he's taken all these shots, nothing's gone in. Maybe like the coach is saying, maybe you're not as good at shooting. I don't know. We'll see what happens.
Here's another one: 0 secondary assists at 5-on-5. So he hasn't gotten any bonus points.
Sure. So yeah. His 1 point in his last 9 games, maybe convert that to 2 or 3 points over 9 games.
Okay, so you and I now have a bet, Dad, in a 50-point pace over the rest of the season. I will take the over. My surprise in Ottawa was just going to be that Drake Batherson leads the team with 18 points in 26 games, which is one more than Brady Kachuk. Both of them pacing for like 55, 60 points. Seems about right to me. So yeah, I think I definitely expected Brady Kachuk to be the only one up above 55 points, and Batherson being right up there with him is what makes me portent. Is that the right use of the word portent?
Important?
No, it's oh no. I'm thesaurus.com let me down here. Let's just forget I said that.
Okay, so let's go to Philly now, and it's your turn, Brian. So who on the Philadelphia Flyers has left you staggered at this point of the season?
I am staggered by the fact that from the deepest doghouse ever known, Shane Gostisbehere is somehow, without a coaching change, without another new one, found his way back to quarterbacking a power play on a regular basis. And like, he's sort of like the power play 1A quarterback. He's with Konechny, Giroux, and Hayes, and then the 1B with Provorov would be Couturier, James Van Riemsdyk, and Voracek. But he's definitely earned back some of the deployment he'd lost over the last couple seasons, reliably above 20 minutes a night compared to 18 minutes a night last season. And before tonight had 23 shots in his last 6 games, and he had like 5 shots in the first period in the game that was happening as we're recording tonight. So for me, I'm very excited by the Shane Gostisbehere reclamation. I don't know, Elon, am I glossing over the really obvious one? I'm sort of just leaving it for you to hit.
Yeah, that's fine. No, it is surprising. I definitely thought Gostisbehere was done. It would be really fun if Gostisbehere is going to ghost bear Provorov, just like he did to Mark Streit way back when, and once again steal someone's top power play job that we thought was locked in. So we'll see if he can hold on. I'm loving all these shots. I would definitely recommend people to add Gostisbehere if they need D and he's still out there, especially if your league is a multi-category league that counts shots on goal. But yeah, obviously we can't go by Philly without mentioning like JVR and Joel Farabee having these crazy seasons that no one expected. They're the clear, obvious answers here. I was actually not planning to say them either because I assumed you were going to say it. So I think we were both just assuming the other one was going to cover, but we've talked about them so much. I think we also have to mention Carter Hart, who Ben and Lewis brought up on short shifts on Thursday. He's been like really terrible. He has .893 save percentage going into today's game. And today he's led in 3 goals on 25 shots. So not doing much better so far against Washington in the third period. So I think my answer is going to be Carter Hart, just because I expect him to be one of those like really reliable and like fewer and farther between reliable starting goalies, like sure starters. And now like Brian Elliott's starting to get more and more starts. So he's not even a sure starter. And like, regardless of that, the more surprising thing is just how badly he's playing.
Yeah, you know how I mentioned earlier in the show that Philip Grubauer ranked 31st out of 38 regular goalies in Delta Fenwick save percentage. Carter Hart ranks 35th. He's only ahead of Greiss, Rinne, and Murray. That means there are only 3 goalies performing poorer relative to their workload this season than Carter Hart, which is a shocker. Philly's a really surprising team, actually, because we also have taken for granted that Travis Konechny is no, like, why aren't we talking about him being a surprise? 4 points in his first 2 games, 8 points in 7 to start the season, and then 8 points in 7 games to start the season. And now that he's back, from COVID, he seems to have picked up his game again. There was a lot of junk in between that start and this return from COVID. But I watched the game on Saturday. He looked pretty good versus Pittsburgh, and it all washes to a 66-point pace for Konechny, which seems pretty nice. Like, if we can get that from him the rest of the way, we'll take it. So just a lot of very strange up and down performances happening in Philadelphia this season. And I think you could probably say the same about their state mates over in Pennsylvania. The Penguins have had a lot going on over the first 20 or so games of their season. Is there anything, Elon? Well, you have to tell me. There must be one thing that has astonished you more than the rest of what's happened for Pittsburgh this season.
Yeah, I will just comment one quick thing about Philly that you brought up. Like with Carter Hart, I will say, like, people have to remember he's 22 years old, which is like really young. Like almost every new goalie, I'm going to mention Tristan Jarry. Here's a spoiler. Jarry's like a lot older than Carter Hart, right? Like Hart shouldn't be a starting goalie in the league at this age. It's very rare. So even though he's been struggling now in a keeper context, I think now's a good time to go for a Carter Hart because I think he's going to learn from these experiences. And it's like very impressive that he's even been in the league this long at this young age. So yeah, don't give up on Carter Hart yet, even though he's struggling. But let's go to Pittsburgh. And yeah, I'm happy to not have to put Evgeny Malkin on this list. He's riding a 3-game point streak going into today. I see he's already got a point today for the Pens. So he's getting closer and closer to that point per game pace after the slow start. So I think that Malkin is going to be fine. And so we don't have to be surprised about him. Crosby, Gensel, Letang all looking good lately. Rustin, Kapanen doing pretty much what I expected them to do. Probably the biggest surprise, but it's too much of a bummer. Like Jason Zucker, we already talked about him like last week. He was a total bust. Like he was drafted 169th overall in the Cupful, dropped in all of my leagues, and then he got injured. So now it's like, forget about him anyways. But yeah, I'm going to go with Tristan Jarry, who I already said I was going to bring up. He's the biggest surprise, not since the start of the year, but definitely since the start of February, because he was terrible for the first 7 games of the year. He went 2-4-1 with an .857 save percentage, was losing starts. Next 10 games, 7-3 with a .99 team save percentage. And yeah, his last 2 games versus Philly haven't been amazing, but just the fact that he's a volume starter is not what I would have expected after that rough January. So anyone who was able to grab Jarry during that dip is very happy now. And I think Pittsburgh is looking like they're turning things around. Like I said, something you've got a lot of wins coming in the future.
Yeah, I guess so.
You're getting a volume. He's going to play a lot of games. He's going to give you a lot of wins, and he has a decent save percentage. What do you want?
I think you might be understating the fact that just his last 2 games against Philly were bad. In his last 6, he's been 909 or under in 5 of those starts. Washes out to a 906 over 6 games with a 4-2-0 record. So the team in front of him has definitely helped him escape a worse fate than he deserved.
You having some trouble?
Yeah. Escaped. Okay. Definitely escaped the fate that he deserved from those starts. So that's great. And I wonder if it just papers over some of the other problems. I guess the good news is that his only competition is Casey DeSmith, who, I'm just looking at the box score from tonight, gave up 3 goals to Philly on 20.
What? No, sorry. Pittsburgh's playing Rangers. Can you just start over? Like, this is going to be an annoying edit of this whole Tristan Jarry thing.
I'll start it over. Sorry. I'm on the wrong day on the scoreboard. Sorry. Okay, I got it. I think you're being overly generous about Tristan Jarry, Elon, saying that only his last 2 games against Philly were bad. He actually has not had a great last 6 games. In 5 of those, he had a 909 save percentage or lower. He still won 4 of them because the team in front of him helps him escape the fate that Jarry might have deserved. And I'm looking at the scoreboard tonight, and I see that Casey DeSmith has stopped 16 of 7. No jinx. Sorry to anybody who's listening to this after the fact and needed a good DeSmith start, and he blew it after I said this. But he stopped 16 to 17 shots against the Rangers today. So there seems to be at least some reasonable internal competition. I don't think Jarry's running away from the job. So you can say volume is great. Also, I think Pittsburgh could go hot and could also go cold. So I don't know that I love him quite as much as you do, Elon.
I mean, I'm just surprised. Like, yeah, Jarry's having I'm a little surprised that you're saying this. I guess we're both surprising each other. Like, DeSmith is playing his first time in a while today just because it was a back-to-back, and yeah, he's having a good game. It's against the Rangers, who are a mess. Like, I don't know. I mean, I think that Jarry's clearly the volume starter until I see otherwise. Just because DeSmith has a good game against the Rangers doesn't mean I'm going to throw everything in flux. Like, yeah, you're right that Jarry hasn't been as good.
I'm just saying it's not a lock.
It's not, I mean,
like,
I don't know.
You said only his last 2 games were bad and he's going to be volume the rest of the way. And I'm saying, no, his last 6 games were like very pedestrian, probably a little worse than pedestrian. And now he's got his backup outplaying him today.
I don't know. Okay, so sure. I mean, I think that Jari is someone that I would want in my fantasy team going forward for the rest of the season, especially if your league counts wins.
So I just want to say I would still go with Jari and hope that it works out. But I felt like you were making it more of a certainty than it was.
Yeah.
So
let me be clear. Nothing about goalies is a certainty.
Okay, great. Pittsburgh. Honestly, after the start where it was very surprising that like Teddy Bluger was leading the scoring on the team, and that aside from Crosby, no one was doing anything that we would expect to do. Everything seems to have leveled out. Like Malkin, you mentioned, he's at a 57-point full season pace, but 9 points in his last 9 games. Like you said, he seems to be figuring things out. So I just pass on the Pittsburgh surprise.
I think that's allowed. Let's just move on then to the San Jose Sharks. And do you want to go first on the Sharks since you didn't have one for the Penguins?
Yeah, I will go. I actually had St. Louis next, but you're right. Okay. Yeah, I'll go first for the Sharks. I am surprised that the year I finally get his jersey marks the year that I also finally give up on Erik Karlsson. It has just been... So we've talked about it weekly. I don't think I need to go on much longer about it. Really disappointing season for Karlsson. He doesn't seem to have that gear that gave him that special something that he had for years in Ottawa, and whether that's injury related, probably is. Like it seems to be in his skating, in his foot speed, and it's a real big bummer. We've had a lot of excuses for him, like recovering from injury, weak forward core, but I am out of excuses, and I am truly surprised by that. I had never-ending faith in Karlsson, and I think this is the year it comes to an end. Elon, do you have any more belief that he can reclaim his former form or like anything close to it?
I mean, maybe he could reclaim like being worth rostering on a fantasy team, but that's obviously a far cry from what we were hoping for. No shots in each of his last 2 games, which stings. It was like he was actually upping his shots a little bit after coming back from injury for a couple of games, but now back to just not being reliable for points or shots. So like that stinks. That's too bad. If you want to be positive, like we've talked about over the last few weeks and debated a little bit, like Logan Couture is doing better than we expected. Evander Kane doing better than expected. But yeah, to me, the biggest surprise was clearly Erik Karlsson. And then let's move over to the St. Louis Blues. And my biggest surprise is probably that Vladimir Tarasenko is back so soon. I really misplayed this, Brian. When the news came out that he's just only going to be reevaluated for his shoulder in February, I thought that meant he probably will then be another couple months and maybe be back for the playoffs or something. But no, he returned yesterday for St. Louis in the 4-3 loss to LA. He had no points, but 4 shots on goal. So I'm very interested to see what Tarasenko is going to do moving forward. But if I have to pick a player in terms of their production that has had me a little bit winded with shock, I guess I'll go with Jordan Kyrou, who's up to 20 points in 25 games now for a 66-point pace. He played on a line with Tarasenko and Ryan O'Reilly on Saturday. I don't think you could get a better pair of line mates on the Blues, assuming Tarasenko's at 100%, which I guess we'll have to wait and see. It's actually interesting. Like Tarasenko's shoulder, I read a Roto-World report that was like, the doctors say he's ready to go, but this might be like the last chance. I really hope that he's going to be fine and be able to hold up for the rest of the year. But if that deployment for Jordan Kyrou and Tarasenko's shoulder holds up, I don't see why Kyrou can't put up similar numbers the rest of the way. And he was completely undrafted in Cupful. So he was added in free agency in all of our divisions, and all the people who added him have been happy with a 66-point pace.
Undrafted in Cupful, drafted in the 2nd round, 35th overall in 2016 by St. Louis. Jordan Kyrou, finally making a dent in the NHL after having done very well in the AHL over the last couple seasons, 63 games, 58 points. So he had nothing left to prove there. And it's really nice to see that production translate to the NHL. And I hope he continues having a productive season. My hot St. Louis surprise, now I'm really running out of synonyms for surprise. My hot surprise is a little less hipster than Jordan Kyrou. I'm going to go with David Perron, who's on pace for a career high 89 points, thanks to 10 power play points in 25 games. He is actually doing something new for the first time in his career beyond being on an 89-point pace. But one of the keys to that pace is being the trigger man on the top power play for the first time in his career. In fact, he's at the top of the NHL in shots and shot attempts per 60 minutes with the man advantage, which is not something David Perron has ever really done over the course of his career. I actually retweeted a thread from Sean Ferris about how Perron has sort of reinvented his 5-on-5 game by taking fewer shots and being more selective. But on the power play, it's the opposite. He's just bombing away. And this is another situation that Tarasenko's return might have an impact on, right? If Tarasenko is going to be the one pulling the trigger on the power play, or they want to share more of the shot attempts with him, how does that impact Perron? We'll wait and see. But for now, holy cow, Perron having himself a season, even when I've believed in him now for long enough, after having not believed in him for a short stretch, after having believed in him before that. For a little too long, I didn't believe in him. But I still believe in a lot of what Perron is doing this season. It's very exciting.
Yeah, he's definitely overperforming what I expected. So he's a good answer. I'll just circle back to Nashville really quickly. This game is ongoing, but Eli Tolvanen now has a power play goal and a power play assist for the Preds. So he's probably also going to be someone who might end up on this list in an end of season episode. So maybe grab him now if he's still available in your league.
I had him as an honorable mention as someone to who's getting looks on the top line and top power play. And I actually retweeted this too. It was an article from On the Forecheck, which is one of the better team blogs anywhere, actually.
Okay.
This is Nashville's team, SB Nation or whatever. It had a really strong explanation for how the Milwaukee Admirals coach that came in and worked with Tolvanen helped him round out into this two-way player that could get the shot he's getting now in the NHL without frustrating his coach and blowing it left and right defensively. So he's worked on his game and he's gotten a new look, and it's really exciting to see him do stuff with it.
Yeah, I mean, the thing with Nashville that we've always said is their power play stinks, right? So if now Tolvanen can come in and help that, and he's going to stay there as long as he needs, right? They're going to be happy with that. And he apparently, according to Kay Towney in the chat here, he leads the Preds in power play goals this year. So it didn't take much.
Here's a question for you, Elon. Rest of season, Tolvanen or Puljujarvi?
Tolvanen.
Yeah, I feel like I'm starting to lean there too. I assume Puljujarvi is going to be back with McDavid, but Tolvanen is with Forsberg and on the top power play.
Also, lines aren't everything, right? I know that some podcasts talk about lines a lot, but and we do too, definitely. But at the end of the day, I still care about production more than lines. And Puljujarvi's been playing with McDavid a lot, and he hasn't been more than a 40-point guy. So give me Tolvanen, who's showing upside for more.
But McDavid was all. I have excuses for Puljujarvi.
Of course,
I've watched a lot of Edmonton this year. He looks good.
I mean, he's good. He's in the NHL. He's in the top six, which is something we didn't necessarily expect a couple of years ago when he went out of the league. So yeah, it's nice to see him good, but is he good? Is he fantasy relevant?
Yeah, he might be.
I don't know. I'm not seeing it. I've seen a lot of people coming. Brian, I'm old. I'm older than you. Okay. I've seen a lot of people come and go on McDavid's wing, and maybe this one will last a little longer than usual.
Sucked.
Yeah. Okay, so let's go to Tampa Bay now, and let's see if you'll have changed your mind on this guy who recently you said you didn't expect him to keep up his point pace, but then he got injured, and now he's back, and that's Anthony Cirelli, who has picked up right where he left off, 3 goals and 1 assist in 4 games since returning from his upper body injury. So now he's up to 14 points in 16 games. Brian, you said his producing was unsustainable before. I assume you still feel that way, though one thing that's changed, which is good for Cirelli, is the lines, because he's been recently lining up with Point and Palat. He's swapped with Steven Stamkos, who's been slumming it with Killorn and Yanni Gourde lately, though I wouldn't say exactly slumming because they're now taking off playing with Stamkos, who, by the way, side note, Stamkos, what a season, right? 21 points in 21 games so far. And don't forget, going into the year, we had some injury concerns for Stamkos because he missed, all of those playoffs except for that one shift. So Stammer is having a great year, and I'm really happy to see that. But I've got to say, my pleasant surprise so far has been Cirelli's production. And I'm very curious to know if you still think it's unsustainable, or if playing on the top line with Point and Palat, or second line, whatever, is going to maybe help him keep it up.
My take was literally last week, right? So
was it? Okay, yeah. I thought it was a couple weeks ago. No, it was before he got injured. I remember when he got injured, I asked you about it. Maybe then I brought it up again. Maybe I talk about Cirelli a lot.
I think you do. He has 3 goals on his last 7 shots. So that's one reason to think that the production won't sustain, none of those coming on the power play. I mean, yeah, he's going to have a good season this year. I think 68 points is a little rich, even if he does hang on the line he's currently on. It's great that he's there. I just don't know that he's a 70-point player in this circumstance. Especially not on the top power play. So like full season. So I would expect him to be like a 55-ish point guy. Maybe he could creep above 60, but approaching 70 just seems like a bit much for me. Before I mention my big surprise, I'm going to just give a shout out. We had a question on Twitter asking us to talk about Brayden Point, whose point pace continues to fall from its peak of 95 in 2018-19. He had an 80-point pace last season, 21 points in 23 games this season, which is a very disappointing 75-point pace. But his shooting percentage is down. So I think, honestly, that's as much as I'm going to say for a point. I think you could still expect him to get up above an 80-point pace. We said at the time 95 points was rich and that he was going to have to grow his game to be able to sustain that because it was coming off unsustainable power play shooting, 40% that year, if I remember correctly, when he scored 20 power play goals. But yeah, I think if you have the right set of expectations for Point, you won't be disappointed. Someone who's really not disappointing fantasy managers this season and plays a position that constantly disappoints fantasy managers, Andre frickin' Vasilevsky. Elon, I thought this was a lock for who we were both going to say on Tampa. Vasilevsky is quietly having a Vezina-worthy campaign. He's tied for first in the league in save percentage with Marc-Andre Fleury with a .942 save percentage. He's expected to have stopped 942 save percentage. And I'm going to go further than that. His 5-on-5 expected Fenwick save percentage is 940. His actual save percentage at 5-on-5 is 965. That's 25 save points ahead of expected for Vasilevsky, which is just massive. Marc-Andre Fleury is 18 save points ahead of expected. Cal Peterson, 18 save points ahead of expected. Lankinen, 11 points above expected. Everyone else, fewer than 10 points above their expected save percentage. But Vasilevsky, 25 points above his expected save percentage. This guy is playing lights out on, I'm going to say it, a mid-pack defensive team in Tampa. Of course, Vasilevsky gets run support, but he's not coasting even when he could. And I'm going to do a bit of an about face that I've been on record calling Vasilevsky an average goalie through his career. This is the first time to me that he's looked like more than that. Of course, it's just an 18-game sample and like no goalie, only 13 goalies have finished the season 10 or more save points ahead of their expected Fenwick save percentage in the last 5 years. So it's unlikely that he stays this good, but I at least just want to give him some credit. Andre Vasilevsky, just amazing all season long.
I mean, Brian, you're kind of like making this too easy for me just because like only you will be shocked that the goalie who's always drafted as the first goalie in all fantasy leagues that just won the cup, that's been like a long time starting goalie in the league who's put up great numbers.
942.
Yeah. So yeah, his numbers are a bit better than expected. Like I'm not shocked that Vasilevsky has been awesome. Like I know that you've been banging the drum that he's not actually as good as people say he is. But I think one thing that we've always underrated about Vasilevsky is he's putting up these like quote unquote like below expected or only averagely as expected numbers, like as like a volume, like playing game in, game out. Like it's hard for goalies to play so much. This guy is like he's amazing. And I'm glad you're finally giving him the credit that he deserves.
Yeah, I guess you're sort of, and like rightfully so, based on our history, you're taking it as like an underhanded compliment for Vasilevsky, but I didn't mean it at all. I just think he's having like one of the best seasons we've seen from a goalie in a long time, and nobody's noticed because it's like, oh yeah, Tampa, they win the Stanley Cup and they're a really good team and they don't even really need a goalie.
Did you just say that like you may be taking this as an underhanded compliment for Vasilevsky? But I promise it's not. I promise it's not a compliment for Vasilevsky. I wouldn't do that.
Oh no, I mean like it's an earnest, positive compliment. I'm not trying to compliment him, but also like nudge him aside at the same time. Like this is pure unadulterated love for Andre Vasilevsky's season.
Yeah. So for the people who are new to keeping Karlsson, Brian is always, like Adam's asking in the chat, like Vasi was average. Yeah. So Brian, uses this stat, which measures the difficulty of shots that the goalie is facing based on a model, which counts a lot of things like the locations of the shots and things like that. And then like compares what the goalie is doing versus what an average goalie would do. And what Brian has always concluded is that actually any average goalie would be putting up the same numbers as Vasilevsky. And it was more like the team that was making Vasilevsky look as good as he was. But now I guess we're seeing this season that even with this model that normally makes Vasilevsky not look as good, now Brian is seeing that Vasilevsky is better than average and actually the best in the league. So good for Andre Vasilevsky. He's finally earned, he won a cup last year, but I think earning your adulation is an even bigger prize. Okay, let's go now to the Toronto Maple Leafs. And I guess I went first with Cirelli for Tampa. So why don't you tell us your shocking player, or no, the player that's had you dumbstruck on the Leafs so far this year?
I'm going to go with Austin Matthews, who's pacing for 64 goals. And the shocking part here is that I'm mostly bought in to him legitimately pacing for 64 goals in an 82-game season. He's shooting 26% on the power play, 17% at 5-on-5, both a touch above his usual shooting percentages, but not by a ton. So it's a really exciting time to be watching hockey for anyone, unless you really, really hate the Leafs, to see Austin Matthews having one of the best goal scoring seasons we've seen in a long, long time, especially from anyone not named Alex Ovechkin. I guess the one thing I'm going to dampen this with is that I'm worried about Matthews' wrist, right? He sat out for 2 games with a wrist injury. He's come back, he's taken 15 shots, but in 3 games, but has yet to score a goal. I don't know if this is a result of just expectations that are too high for Austin Matthews or legit reason for concern that he might not be as strong right now as he was before that injury.
I mean, all I know is that the Leafs are basically a lock to make the playoffs at this point. So as a new-ish Leafs fan, please rest that wrist as much as needed so that the Leafs don't blow it in the first round of the playoffs again. Okay. I know people who have Matthews on their fantasy teams don't want Matthews to take any breaks, but it would be nice to make sure he's 100% for a full and hopefully long playoff run. So yeah, Matthews has been awesome, but to me, I can't talk about the Leafs and not talk about the player who's actually shocked me the most. I've literally had to double take and look at the stats and look at the line combinations every time I see that Joe Thornton is just the fact that he's rostered in 91% of a couple divisions right now. He's playing on the top line with Matthews and Marner. We've already covered this, honestly. And honestly, I'd even consider him, even with this great deployment, I might consider him a bit of a snoozer in leagues that count peripherals. He only has 2 assists and 3 shots in his last 5 games. So aside from assists, he's really not giving you anything, but still 11 points in 14 games for a 41-year-old Joe Thornton is wild. He paced for 31 points last year on the Sharks, and I expect him to be a bottom sixer on the Leafs, but Sheldon Keefe had other plans, and it's wild, and I'm here for it. I love it. It's fun to watch Leafs games and see Joe Thornton in this position.
Well, I'm going to shout out another old man while you're shouting out Joe Thornton. I went on a tweet storm. I don't want to call it a tweet storm. Whatever. I went on a tweet love fest for Jason Spezza earlier this afternoon, who's on a 52-point pace from the 4th line. He's playing only 9 to 12 minutes a night and seeing power play 2 deployment at best, but no problem. Jason Spezza is still pacing for 52 points, which would be nearly enough to lead the Devils in scoring, the Senators in scoring, and fall only behind Philip Forsberg for scoring in Nashville from the 4th line with very, very 4th line minutes. And I'm just very frustrated that we were robbed the last 3 years of being able to see what Spezza can do. I'm not saying it's all sustainable. I'm just saying he's had more to give than we've seen for the last 3 years, as I've shouted from the rooftops for the last 3 years. I'm very excited to see him getting one last glorious run here before his career finally ends.
Yeah, it's been fun. So we have Thornton, we have Spezza. Also, don't forget, Wayne Simmons was on a bit of a roll before he got injured. So the Leafs were potentially going to be a really fun reclamation project type of team for players near the end of their career. So we'll see if this could continue with these 3 guys. And Simmons, obviously, once he returns, when. Let's go to Vancouver now. And I guess it is my turn. And how can I not just go with Brock Besser and his 13 goals and 28 points in 28 games? I see you nodding because, of course, this guy, he paced for 65 points overall last year and was trending downwards by the end of the year, only 6 points in his final 15 games before getting hurt to end his 2019-20 campaign. So there were some concerns going into this year. He had been bumped from the Pettersson line at times, but this season, Besser has been blazing hot from beginning to end, including a 1 goal, 2 assist game in the 4-2 win over the Leafs on Saturday. Brian, I know that we can say this 19.7 shooting percentage won't last, and probably Besser will slow down a little bit, but maybe is it possible he's just found another gear? He's in his 4th year in the league, and I don't know, he's obviously been a revelation. Even if he slows down a little bit, it's still way above expectations for me.
Way above expectations for me too, which makes me actually reconsider, were our expectations totally off base for Brock Besser. We were so scared going into this season based on his 1920 campaign when he was booted to the third line for 10 games and then got injured. But in the playoffs, he looked fine, and his points actually held steady from 18-19 into 19-20. I feel like we just got greedy when it came to Brock Besser and wanted too much. It's really nice to see Besser doing his thing and seemingly having taken that next step and having that very safe, certain deployment, touch wood. But yeah, I wonder if we're only surprised because we didn't give him as much credit as we should have preseason.
I'm surprised because he had 6 points in his final 15 games last year and was bumped from the top line. So that's why I'm surprised. Yeah.
Well, that's it though. It was only 15 games and he was bumped from the top line for most of those, like pointless.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So you're saying like I read too much into that. So yeah, there you go. Like Brock Besser's a superstar. Pettersson's injured right now and Besser's still not slowing down. So I'm really excited to see what he's going to do for the rest of the season.
Yeah. And then I'm going to take us over to Vegas for our third last phenomenon that we've noticed this NHL season so far. And actually, it's not a very phenomenal team. The phenomenon isn't working. Not a very surprising team for the Vegas Golden Knights this season. The best I could do, aside, the obvious one is Marc-Andre Fleury just ripping the starter's job, right? Doing exactly what Vasilevsky's doing in Tampa. But in Vegas, where he had a very clear challenger who is not healthy at the moment, but still, if Lehner was healthy, Fleury would still seemingly be just running from the job. He ripped that bloody sword right from his back to put up this .942 save percentage this season. That's the obvious one. My honorable mention in Vegas is that they don't have a defenseman pacing for more than 18 power play points this season. We were like, is it going to be Pietrangelo? Is it going to be Theodore? Which one of these guys is going to quarterback and put up a ton of power play points? The answer so far has been neither.
Yeah, and now I think they keep on changing who's injured. Like I think Pietrangelo's hurt right now, and they keep changing also who's on the top power play. So yeah, it's been kind of a disappointment for both of them, but I still would expect big numbers from Shea Theodore. He would be my pick moving forward for who's the defenseman to own on Vegas. Brian, I'm going to shout out a couple other players on the Golden Knights that are having above expectation seasons. I got to mention Mark Stone, 27 points in 21 games for a 105-point pace. Like I knew he was good, but I was not expecting more than a point per game. Like he's been a pretty reliable point per game guy for the last few years. And all of a sudden we're looking at 100-point Mark Stones. This is similar to like a Patrick Kane or an Andrei Kopitar. Like I know they're good, but I did not expect them to have their best ever season this year. And then probably though, my biggest surprise has got to be Alex Tuch, who was basically a non-entity last season, only 17 points in 42 games, but is now in the midst of a huge breakout with 8 goals in his last 7 games, including 2 yesterday versus the Sharks. He had 12 goals and 19 points. Sharks. Are you with me? I see you're okay. He has 12 goals in 19 games. He has 12 goals and 19 points in 21 games on the season now for a 74-point pace. And most of the season has been playing on line 3 with Cody Glass and Nicolas Roy. And that has done nothing to slow him down. Like I said, he had a couple goals on Saturday. If he can stick as a 70-plus point guy from the third line this season, that would be like really impressive. I can't even think of another example of a player who's had this many points from this deployment. Of course, it has to actually last for the whole season, but I'm very impressed with what we've seen from Alex Tuch, especially given his deployment.
Very impressed and ride the hot streak. And in the top 6, Alex Tuch is, I think, easily a 60-point threat. Out of the top 6, I'm not convinced even with this run he's on, which has seen him score 8 times on 19 shots. So he's got a 42% shooting percentage, which obviously is not anything that's sustainable. So I want the greatest things for Alex Tuch, and I'm ready to buy in the second I see something sustainable happen, because from everything we've seen, the talent is there. He's a legit top 6er in the league. But unfortunately, I just don't think this is it beyond the end of the hot streak. So treat him like Jordan Staal for now. Add him to your roster. Wait until he goes cold, and then you can probably let go unless his deployment changes for the better.
Yeah, I think a big difference is I think there is a decent chance that Tuch's deployment could change. Like Jordan Staal is like always a guarantee to slow down. Like Alex Tuch could just keep this going. He might need some change of scenery, but for now he's doing well here, and I would definitely grab him in pretty much any league if he's still out there. All right, Brian, Washington, it's my turn to go first. I'll tell you what I'm not surprised about. I'm not surprised about Tom Wilson getting himself suspended again, this time for 7 games for boarding Boston's Brandon Carlo. I know that like some people are questioning whether he deserves a suspension based on like the specifics of the play, but obviously the NHL took previous offenses into account, and I don't know if we really want to get into that here. In terms of the fantasy impact, this is like in Yahoo, right? You can't put suspended players in IR. So this is a very interesting situation if you have him or if you don't have him, right? Because if you have him, you really have to ask yourself, can I withstand, like in a head-to-head league, like 2 to 3 weeks of not having Tom Wilson on my roster? I guess 2 weeks, like and using and wasting a spot, right? If you can withstand it, then hold on, because he'll be back for your fantasy playoffs. And he's been like an amazing asset, especially in multi-category leagues this year. And then if you have to drop him, like, but I would trade him, right? If you can't, if you're in a situation where you need to win over the next couple of weeks, trade Wilson to that team that is comfortable in their situation, and then they could wait and you might get something. So, like, don't drop him for nothing. And then, also, if you are one of these teams that's like locked into the playoffs and you're looking ahead, trade for Tom Wilson, take a hit for a couple of weeks, and he'll be there for you when the time comes. Anyways, that's Wilson. He's not my answer, but Brian, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to weigh in on that very quickly, just to take your advice a step further about trading Tom Wilson. If you are like needing to contend for the next couple of weeks and you can't afford to throw them away and you're in a head-to-head league, look at the teams you're going to play for the next couple of weeks and maybe toss Tom Wilson their way. And then you'll have taken one active player off their roster for the week you play them.
Oh, sneaky. By the way, I should mention that Washington plays like a Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday schedule next week, which means that probably someone was going to get benched. So you might be thinking, oh, I'm losing all these games from Wilson, but it's like you would have had to bench someone on those days anyways. You might not actually be losing games played. So take a look carefully before you drop someone who's been as valuable as Tom Wilson. Okay, we've already gushed over Nicholas Backstrom's insane run this season. Recently, he's now up to 26 points in 23 games. That was going into today. I won't even look. I'm sure he did well today as well for the Capitals. So I'm going to go in the other direction and pick Evgeny Kuznetsov, who's missed a bunch of time with COVID, only has 2 assists in 8 games since returning. All right, fine. Let me just check what Washington did today and see if Evgeny Kuznetsov was able to do anything in the 3-1 win.
Nope, but Backstrom did have an assist.
There you go. So like at this point, like Kuznetsov hasn't been on the top power play, right? It's been Jacob Verana there. And he's only got a couple of shots per game. Like he's not really helping you. He's kind of like a Joe Thornton, except like not getting points. So I feel like it might be the time to just not only consider Kuznetsov as the biggest surprise so far this season, but maybe just to flat out call him a snoozer. Like he was drafted 114th overall on average in the Cupful this year. And I've got him in my IR, Brian, and I haven't dropped anyone for him. At some point, I'm going to want to make a move again. But I think my move might just be to drop Kuznetsov because he's doing nothing and he's not giving me any reason to activate him.
Yeah, I want to tell you all the reasons you're wrong, but I don't really have any. I guess the reasons would be that he could end up on the top power play with Ovechkin, which he did play. Like Ovechkin played both power plays today, it looks like. On one of them, his line mates were Sprung, Kuznetsov, and Eller. The other was the Vrana, Oshie, Backstrom combo. And Kuznetsov could also be with Ovechkin at even strength. And I feel like Washington might feel like that for them to be successful, Evgeny Kuznetsov has to be going. So I wonder if they help him get going, which would make it hard to drop him if they do that. But for now, I really do wonder how worth rostering he is. And remember, he's a guy who doesn't give you a whole lot if he's not putting up a point, right? He's not a big shooter at all. He doesn't do any peripherals. He's down 1.5 minutes total time on ice compared to last season per night. So it's been a really rough go for him. And he is legit a snoozer candidate. I'm going to go with a surprise that's going to surprise you, Elon. I'm going to name my surprise Alex Ovechkin. And I guess this is my party poop mentality coming over, because Ovechkin going into today's game was pacing for only 30 goals, which would be the lowest 82 game pace of his career. He's seeing more 5-on-5 minutes a night than he has since 2010-11, a full decade ago. But here, yeah, I'm just going to start that over. Okay. So it's talking about Kuznetsov. But now for my surprise on Washington, which might be a surprise to you, Elon, I'm going to say Alex Ovechkin, pacing for only 30 goals going into today's game, which would be the lowest 82 game total of his career. But at the same time, I'm also going to say don't panic, even though no one is, because I think he's still doing just fine. I was looking at the Cupful, he's ranked like 25th in total could cut full points this year, even with this slowdown in goal scoring, which I actually don't think is going to last. Ovechkin is actually seeing more 5-on-5 minutes a night than he has since 2010-11. That's a full decade ago. And his shot rates, his expected goals, they all look fine. But on the power play, he's converting on 8% of his shots versus the usual 15. 5-on-5, 8% conversion rate versus his usual 13% there. So I guess this is just a time for you to kick tires and see if Ovechkin's manager thinks he's not going to deliver what he hoped. You might try to buy, but I don't think anyone is really selling Ovechkin. Here's the ultimate sell high, Elon. If you can sell James Van Riemsdyk for Alex Ovechkin, you're laughing.
Sure. Yeah, but it's probably impossible. But if anyone can pull it off, please tweet at us and we will retweet that for sure and give you lots of accolades for your negotiating prowess. OV scored today, by the way. So now
that's the buy low window slamming shut.
Maybe that 30 goal pace now goes to 33 goal pace since it's still a pretty small sample size. Don't forget he's missed a lot of time, right? Like Washington has missed a lot of time with all those cancellations. And then he also missed time on that 4-game, I guess, going on the COVID list. So yeah, I think he's maybe still ramping up. And with Kuznetsov, by the way, he's also like coming off of COVID. So we've talked about some other players. Maybe he's not at his best right now. So we don't have to maybe be concerned about Kuznetsov yet for like his career. But for this season, like this whole, like we said, it's already halfway done. So how long could you wait? Let's go to the last team, the Winnipeg Jets. And I guess I started by picking Kuznetsov on Washington. So you could end things with the Jets telling us your surprise first.
Okay. My surprise is I feel like we're ending with a whimper here. I guess I'll just say that, well, I have two. Neil Pionk has a 62-point pace this season without top power play billing. That's one surprise. And the other is Mark Scheifele breaking his point per game mold and is now up to a 113-point pace. And most of that, both for Scheifele and Pionk, I'm thinking is sustainable. So it's pretty exciting time to have either of these guys on your roster. Neil Pionk looks like it was going to be a really disappointing season for him when Morrissey took over the top power play early on. And yet he has just soldiered on. And then Mark Scheifele seems to have found another gear, which is just very happy and exciting.
Yeah, I think it's probably North Division effects a little bit. So I don't know if you should expect the same number of points next year when we get back to a regular season. But I'm sure those guys have been amazing. But Brian, don't say we're going to end with a whimper because I haven't gone yet. And I got some fire for the Winnipeg Jets because I think we've got a competitor of who's trying to outdo who for being the worst part of the trade that happened earlier this year between the Jets and the Columbus Blue Jackets. Because we already talked about Patrick Laine slumping recently. Well, so is Pierre-Luc Dubois. He only has 1 goal and no assists in his last 5 games. He showed some signs of life with a couple big games at the end of February. But at this point, Dubois has gone just as cold as Laine. Anyone who drafted either of these guys really wishes that this trade never happened. Though I guess Dubois was already having his issues with Columbus, but that was probably due to requesting the trade or who the heck knows. All I know is that Laine has been a big disappointment because people saw what he did in the playoffs last year, probably drafted him thinking that he'll be able to continue that on the Blue Jackets. And it's not going that way. I wouldn't drop him yet unless it's a shallower league. And if it's a shallower league, I probably would because he's doing nothing right now. And I don't see a huge reason to expect a big uptick. Like he's a good player. So obviously the reason is just because he's a good player and he's still going to get an opportunity, but like, it's not looking that great right now.
Sorry. It's not, but I think we have to just be patient. I'm not ready to write off Pierre-Luc Dubois in Winnipeg. Like last year, like he's been a really steady 60-point player in a system that worked for him in Columbus. And I guess like things are a lot different in Winnipeg than they are in Columbus, right? Remember Columbus being one of the best teams at protecting their goalie. Meanwhile, Connor Hellebuyck just habitually thrown under the bus time and time again. Huge high danger shots constantly coming against him. So I wonder if Pierre-Luc Dubois' head is spinning a little bit as he's arrived in Winnipeg, but I'm not about to get down on him at all. He's still got 2 or 3 shots a game most of the time. And I am expecting him to at least be, I think he's reliable. Well, I don't know, like a 50.
Okay, yeah. Boring. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so he's gonna at least be boring. I just feel like his ceiling is higher now in Winnipeg than it was in Columbus. So I'm here for that. To some extent. Remember, he's also young. He's 22 years old, so there's still room to grow. But maybe the floor isn't quite as safe. It's a good point.
Also, he hasn't been on the top power play, right? It's been Stastny, Wheeler, Scheifele, Connor, and Morrissey. And then Dubois has been playing with Ehlers. who's doing fine, but like in Kopp, Perot, and Neil Pionk, who you love. But yeah, like, I mean, obviously he's not nothing. If he was dropped in any of my leagues, I'd probably take a shot on him, but I'm not. Yeah, like you said, like he might just be a 50, 55 point guy this year, which is nothing. In a lot of leagues, that's not rosterable. So take a look and see if you're snoozing on Pierre-Luc Dubois, depending on the value of your free agents. You could tweet at us at Keeping Karlsson. Tell us your free agents if you have Pierre-Luc Dubois and you're wondering if you should drop him.
Or Evgeny Kuznetsov, for that matter. A couple really interesting snoozers to round out this show. Yeah,
so we're definitely not going out with a whimper. We're going out with a bang. And we hope that everyone enjoyed this show. Like Brian said, the first of its kind, trying to do something different with this trying to do something different with this 31 teams, 31 surprises episode. Let us know what you thought of the show. Tweet at us at Keeping Karlsson. You could ask us advice questions like we said, or you can share your feedback on our product. If you want to chat with us more often than just a tweet now and then, which we try to get to once a day, why not try out our patron-only Discord community where we're having a lot of fun. You sign up to be a patron for $5 US a month, and you get in our community. And then you have access to Brian, myself, Ben, and Lewis, like Dave, all the people, all the personalities of Keeping Karlsson. And Brian and I are there all the time trying to help people out with their different fantasy decisions and just having really fun chats. The live game chat is always a really good time. So if that sounds at all interesting to you, we also have a patron cast coming up, which is a bonus show just for the patrons. So check it out, keepingkarlsson.com/patron.
And I'm also going to mention a couple other Keeping Karlsson family podcasts along with Short Shifts, which already comes in this feed. Go check out a couple others that we love and support and present, starting with Dave Betton's stream scheme. He shared his list of streamers with me just before releasing his episode today. And I really like his shallow streamer this week. I actually almost added him for today's game. I don't think he's played yet, so I'm not sure if I was right or wrong to not add him, but you can go check it out. Elon, I think you mentioned his name quickly in passing. The team he plays for, their name starts with a D. And so does his. That's probably, I was supposed to tease so everyone goes to download it, but go, you won't be sorry. And also our Cacupful Stat Attack podcast, which is all about the Cacupful, where like, if you're like, I'm not even in the Cacupful, why should I listen? Because you are hearing about the trends and happenings from the biggest and best and most competitive fantasy hockey league in the world. You'll hear a couple fun tidbits too, like the big spenders of the week include Caged Gorillas, who spent $22 on a free agent Igor Shesterkin, and the Super Bowlers, who happen to have Carter Hart come available in their division. They spent $20 of fab to add him. Imaginary dollars.
Of course, yeah. Also, I will shout out the last Stat Attack episode had a really great interview with a couple managing a fantasy team, Khalil and Allison, who I've never really heard of a pair of people that live together, like managing a team together. To me, I can't even imagine doing that. I feel like I would just argue and there'd be so much blame going around whenever a pick goes wrong. It was really fun to hear how they manage that. So that was a really fun part. And every week there's a different interview with a different couple competitors. So yeah, check that out. And the Stat Attack and the Stream Scheme and all of our shows. Yeah, if you're not subscribed to Keeping Karlsson, we'd of course really appreciate it. And you could get those awesome appreciate it. And you can get those awesome Short Shifts episodes that Ben and Lewis drop twice weekly. But okay, with that, Brian, I think we're done with all of our plugs. So let's get the heck out of here. Let's cue the outro music. And why don't you go ahead and read us the credits?
All right. This episode of the Keeping Karlsson Fantasy Hockey Podcast was presented by Dauber Hockey and powered by our patrons. A little special shout out this week to Kevin Hebert, Jeremy Versilo, and John Newhold for helping us so much behind the scenes with a lot of our content, with Cacupful.com, with the Stat Attack, with our Discord server and patron community. Thanks, guys. Logo art by Brendan Weeb, outro music by Pat Roach. This episode was researched with help from Dauber Hockey, Frozen Pool, Dauber Prospects, Natural Stat Trick, Evolving Hockey, Cat Friendly, Charting Hockey, hockeygoalies.org, Hockey Reference, Hockey Viz, Hockey Database, Elite Prospects, Roto World, and Yahoo.
Great job as always, Brian. Looking forward to hearing Short Shifts in a couple of days and looking forward to talking to you for a regular episode of Keeping Karlsson next Sunday.
Wow, you make the word regular sound so exciting. Until then, remember, fantasy hockey is for everyone.
All right. Thanks, everyone, for the fun, lively chat room. Sometimes I don't like the lively chat room because it gets Brian all distracted.
I, at one point, definitely did. You caught me.
Yeah. It's also like distracted because I see it like flowing. Then I see like Brian KK writing messages. I'm like, I'm talking to this person and he's clearly not listening to me. I'm trying to have a conversation.
I can do both.
No, you can't.
I have.
badly.
You don't know what else
you
happens.
go like this. I finish asking my question, and you're like, yeah. So Spezza, right? Okay, yeah. Jason Spezza is looking good. Yeah, that's generally how it goes. And then you go, oh, let me just take that all again. I'm like, ugh. But anyway, I just complained. But this was a great show, Brian. You've outdone yourself.
You too, Elon.
Okay.
Will you send me your half of the show notes so I can
well, I sent you the actual official show notes doc. Like I invited you to it. So why don't you post yours in there and I'll post mine in there. And that's the one I'm going to share with the patrons, which is another perk of being a patron.
Okay, great. Yeah, you don't even have to listen to us. Just Control F for the players you want to know what we think of them.
Then you won't know what Brian and I argued about.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So see, I'm going to have dinner. I haven't eaten dinner today. I've had the weirdest day for food. Okay. Oh, good for you.
Great energy from you for not having eaten.
Well, so we ate like a gross amount of cheese at like 4 p.m.
Was it like nice cheese?
Yeah, like we had gone to the cheese store and we had all these nice cheeses that we bought. And we just like sat there. We had like the peeler. We're just like peeling cheese, cracker, like olive, and just.
You have a cheese peeler?
Yeah.
So bougie.
I mean, what do you? Well, you want to have thin slices of cheese. You don't want to have like chunks.
Like the little triangular thing with the blade in it.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
But yeah, like then we went to Wakoti and both Dean and I were just like, do you feel like you have a big block of cheese in your stomach while you're walking? Like, it was really felt gross. So now I'm excited to go and have some like salad or I don't know, something.
Can you tell me what kind of cheese you had?
Oh, well, I don't know. We just tried to get a bunch of different ones. So we had like a soft brie cheese, and then there was I don't know, like a cheddar, like I don't know, some like I usually basically how it goes. There was one with za'atar in it. That was like the fancy cheese. Usually I go to there's this place called Global Cheese in Kensington Market, and it's a fun store because you go in and you sort of just like they're like, what do you want? And then you're like, I'll have just like a variety. I just want something different. They're like, okay, let me show you one. Let me show you. And they like take it a little bit. Try this. What do you think? And then I try like, that's good. Like, okay, how much you want of it? And then they like, okay, that. And then they just like shove cheese at you until you like have filled. And they're like, any more? And then finally at the end, you're like, okay, I think it's enough. And then we end up with really fun cheeses. It's always different every time. So that's an unpaid promo for Global Cheese in Kensington. They also have really good spicy olives.
Yeah, I think you should pay more attention to your cheese selection. Like, is it cows or like there's some like basic
info. It was all cow.
Like, where's it from? Okay.
Yeah. Like the thing is they said it to
Quebec
me.
Cheese is really, is known to be to be sought after.
I'm not good like that. My brain is like, I remember all this like random hockey stuff and then I forget most other things. It's actually kind of, I should work on that.
Can I give you a cheese recommendation?
Sure. Beamster. That's what Fabio's saying.
That's it.
There it is.
How did you know?
Because Fabio just wrote Beamster.
Oh, there you go. Oh, that's amazing.
We've had it before. I love it. Yeah, I love all the cheese.
Top tier cheese, Beamster. We should tier cheeses.
That'd be a fun show. But I also have a Baby Bell in the fridge. So anytime I want some little nugget, just grab one of those Baby Bell circles. It's so fun to wrap the wax.
Yeah, I feel like the wax is actually the best part of the Baby Bell. Like unwrapping it is better than the eating it.
I like the eating, but yeah, I also.
I'm not saying I don't like the eating.
What's the worst cheese? I know what you'll say. You probably don't. No, like craft slices.
You're gonna think that's what I'm gonna say, but I have a very soft spot for craft slices. Oh. Also, like the Laughing Cow, like the.
Oh, I like that one.
Soft triangles, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's another one that you would think I would poo-poo, but I won't.
Laughing Cow isn't so cheap actually. Like I think it's like a somewhat high-end-ish option at the grocery store.
You know what I don't like? I don't like the like grocery store like name brand, like no name brand cheeses that like say they're different than the other cheeses but aren't. Like like Colby Jack or whatever. That just tastes like nothing.
It's just like another cheddar.
Yeah.
Just call yourself cheddar. Stop trying to brag that you're something else.
Yeah, I'm sure it works. I'm sure they sell like I'm sure it works marketing, but the taste is not different. I don't even know what that means, Colby Jack.
We also have a huge tub of feta cheese that we got from Costco. That's like 3 kilograms in the fridge. It takes up like so much space. And like oftentimes I like want to have some feta, but it's too much of a hassle to like take everything that's on top of it like off and then pull it out. And then they gotta like, it's like such a hassle to get it. So I feel like I waste all this good. I think I need to like actually right now move some into some Tupperware and get it more.
Oh, that's a good idea.
I'm gonna do that right now before I forget.
More accessible, smaller chunks.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, this is fun. Brian, I wish we could chat more often. We only talk about the
should
podcast and
release
cheese.
this year's Schmore Goalies board, and instead of goalies, like without any warning, it'll just be us tearing cheeses.
The thing is, like, I'm like not like I don't have a lot of negatives. Like I like a lot of things, and it's hard for me to decide what I like better because I just like for me, it's like my scale is like between 1 and 3. It's like I don't like it, it's fine, or it's great. And like I don't have all those nuances of the other ones. So I would just have a lot of 3 out of 3 that I would have a lot of trouble ranking. So that'd be my problem. I don't have that like really distinct palate. Same with like beers and like scotches. Like I don't know. I'm not good with that stuff. But I'd like to hear yours. That's for sure.
I told you Beamster, man.
But we would also need to like come up with some words. It would be
Good.
lame if we just like sort of named a bunch of cheeses and for everyone like, oh yeah, that one's good. You have to have all those like fancy words that foodies use of like it has a flavorful. Like I'm sure there's like
sounds
fun
like too much
words.
work now.
Mouthfeel. You could use the term mouthfeel.
If anybody finds a good cheese review blog or podcast, feel free to send us a link.
Okay, so this is
I
fun.
won't listen, but I'm just curious to know.
Just to know if it exists.
I want to know what words they use. I want to. Yeah. Okay, send me a word cloud of a cheese blog or podcast. A Wordle.
I listen to a podcast sometimes called The Sporkful, which isn't about only cheese, but it's about food in general, and it's pretty entertaining. There's like a lot of interesting stories. It's like like it's kind of like a This American Life, but about food. Like it's like stories with food as the subject. It's always really good.
Do you get hungry?
Sometimes, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Bye.
Bye. Thanks to everyone in the chat.
Hey, don't forget to send me the file and everything.
Yeah. It's happening now.
Awesome. Okay. Bye.
14 minutes.
Cool. Hopefully we don't have a power outage.
So at the end.
Did I stop the recording yet? Oh, let me do that. Let me say bye.
We're still
live until now.